Great start. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our 5th of August meeting. I'd like to open the meeting at 7 o'clock. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Our meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people. And on behalf of Banyule City Council, I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and also pay my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders that may be present and joining us today. Our diversity statement: our community is made up of diverse cultures, beliefs, abilities, bodies, sexualities, ages and genders. We are committed to access, equality, participation and the rights of everyone, principles that empower, foster harmony and increase the well-being of an inclusive community. I'd like now to pass on to our Chief Executive Officer, Alison Beckwith, who will read out the formalities. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome all to the Ordinary Council meeting tonight. My name is Alison Beckwith. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Banyule City Council. Tonight's meeting is being held in person in accordance with the provision of Council's governance rules and the Local Government Act 2020. The meeting is being live streamed via Council's website and Facebook page. The live stream is not interactive, so for those of you at home, any comments or private messages directed to us while the stream is live will not be presented to the Council or have any bearing on tonight's meeting. Council's request to speak methods will continue to allow participation of our residents without having to attend the meeting in person. I'll just take you through some rules of the public participation during the meeting. Public question time will occur at the conclusion of tonight's meeting. If a member of the public who submitted a question is present in the gallery, they will be welcome to read their question out as submitted or have the question read out on their behalf by a member of staff. If indeed the resident is not present, the question will not be read out at tonight's meeting. However, all public questions and responses will be included in the meeting minutes following tonight's meeting. I'll just remind you all that no statement may be derogatory, defamatory or directed to an individual councillor, member of staff, ratepayer or member of the public. A 2-minute time limit does apply to all requests to speak. The timer will be used and a warning will sound at the 1.5 minute mark. And we ask you to start summing up for the last 30 seconds. And if indeed your statement is being read out on your behalf by an officer, they will also sum up. We ask that members of the gallery please check their phones and ensure that it's either switched off or on silent mode to avoid any disruptions to tonight's meeting. I would just like to remind everyone that Council has a zero tolerance for any form of bullying, harassment or violence, and everyone in the gallery, community members of Council staff and councillors are expected to respect the individual views of all others, irrespective of their own views held, and respectfully give everyone the opportunity to participate in tonight's meeting. If any members of the public gallery do depart the chamber while the meeting is still in progress, we ask that you do not hold conversations in the foyer or even downstairs and wait until you're actually outside the building. Noise from these areas do actually reverberate up into the chamber and affect those listening at home through the live stream. So I thank you in advance for that. Excuse me. I will now introduce the councillors who are in attendance for tonight's meeting, and I'll start to my left. Councillor Peter Castaldo, Councillor Fiona Mitsonikos, Councillor Peter Di Morales and Councillor Alison Champion. And to my right, I have the Mayor, Councillor Tom Malikan, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Rick Garotti, Councillor Alida McKern, Councillor Elizabeth Neely and Councillor Mark Di Pasquale. Supporting the councillor group tonight is the executive team. So over to the right, we have Mark Giglio, Director of Corporate Services, and Darren Bennett, Director of Assets and City Services. And over to the left, Joseph Tobacco, Director of Community Wellbeing, and Natasha Swan, Director of City Development. Also joining the council team tonight are our governance team and IT team who are assisting with tonight's proceedings. We thank you in advance for participating in tonight's meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alison. We'll move on to apologies. There are no apologies tonight. Leaves of absence, there are no leave of absence requests. confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 15th of July. Look for a councillor to move those minutes. Councillor Garotti, seconded Councillor Neely. I'll put that. All those in favour? That is carried. Disclosure of interest, councils, as required by all council meetings, councillors must declare a conflict of interest at the start of the meeting and leave the meeting when that item is presented to council. Councillors are required to leave the meeting and return when the item has been resolved. At any point throughout the meeting, if any councillor recognises they have a general or material interest, they can flag that at that point and follow the same procedures. Are there any disclosures of interest tonight? There are none. Disclosure of interest from staff, officers that are present. Can I now ask if you have any conflicts of interest with the item presented tonight? There are none. Procedural motion. Councillors, I'm asking for a procedural motion to reorder the business for tonight's agenda. I'd like to propose that the first bring forward the agenda item 6.1, the adoption of the proposed housing strategy and neighbourhood character strategy, after item 2.1, the petition for the heritage overlay to be applied to Malcolm Road, with the agenda ordered as printed following. Can I ask the councillor to move that motion? Move Councillor McKern, seconded Councillor Garotti. All those in favour? That is carried. Move on to urgent business. There are no urgent items of business. There are two petitions. The first petition is the petition for the heritage overlay to apply to Malcolm Road and Merton Lane in Ivanhoe. There are several speakers. The first speaker is Con. Welcome, Con. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of 11 long-term residents who reside on the east side of Malcolm Road, and they've entrusted me to speak on their behalf. They can't be here for various reasons. Their names are Margaret and Bob Augustine. They've lived in their home for 30 years. Their neighbours, Annunziata and Salvatore Palmieri, have lived in their home for 41 years. Their neighbours, Lucy and Giovanni Saromendo, have lived in their home for 53 years. Marissa and Michael Rocco have lived in their home for 42 years. Michael's here in the gallery tonight. Will Semler, who's lived in his home for 71 years, and Lorraine and Jeff Matson, who've been in their home for almost 50 years, who in fact have an original contract that was signed by Jennings back in 1937. These people are all asking you to consider a heritage overlay on their homes, all other homes on the east side of Malcolm Road, including Merton Lane. They want this councillor group to know that their homes were built by A.V. Jennings and are a significant part of the Beaumont estate, that the neighbourhood character and uniform streetscape of the precinct is special and it warrants protection. The current zoning applied to Malcolm Road is inconsistent, it's an anomaly, and it needs to be addressed. The gardens and open spaces designed to foster community and connectedness all those years ago are at risk if an overlay is not adopted evenly to both sides of Malcolm Road. The Banyule City Council should be encouraging the retention of all buildings that contribute to the character of the precinct and avoid future deviations that will diminish the significance of Beaumont. This councillor group has it in their power to preserve a Banyule gem which saw construction commence in March 1937, a month before this building here was opened, along both sides of Malcolm Road, on the hill, past the new town hall. On a side note, the Beaumont estate was first identified as an area of significance in 1985 by Graham Butler and not in 1999, as appears in the notes tonight. There are at least 15 residents of the Beaumont estate who have this in their possession. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Con. Deborah Candine and Hindus. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, councillors, for letting me speak. And I am a resident of the Beaumont estate. I've wanting to assure you that we're not here to be combative, and we're certainly not NIMBYs. but we really want to point out the significance and importance of the Beaumont Estate and to actually define the Malcolm Road east side to be included with the cultural overlay. And the culture is important. It is not just a symbol of colonialism. It is actually the reason why they were chosen to be a Californian bungalow style was because Mr. Albert Victor Jennings chose that style to suit the environment because it allows passive cooling as well as allow retaining the heat in the house in the middle of winter by having sliding doors internally and by having front and back doors opposite based on the Californian bungalow style to be able to allow passive cooling to suit our unique environment here. As I look out from my bedroom window, looking down the street that I live in, I see the east side of Malcolm Road and straight into what is known as a warung. That is the type of tree, it's a ghost gum that we learnt in the think tank. That is actually significant to the Wurundjeri people. And if you actually do not have this cultural overlay, that will require certain people to actually have to cut them down in order to put the multi-dwellings that are proposed. And so we certainly don't want to see a significant part of our environment. And we know about the environment because the City of Banyul's produced these booklets for every one of us to preserve the gardens, to preserve the environment, and that's why it's so important to preserve the culture of Malcolm Road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. The third speaker is David Brenton. It's David. Yep.
Evening. We purchased our house over 50 years ago, and at the time we had no idea of the significance of the Beaumont Estate. In fact, we'd never heard of it. But within days, we'd had neighbours coming in our front door telling us about the significance of the Jennings Estate, and they emphasised Jennings' aim of designing an innovative project for ordinary people. I'd like to say well done for those of you who walked along our street. You would have noticed the sense of harmony of the houses, the trees and the gardens, but closer inspection would reveal subtle differences between the houses, which make each one unique. Little wonder that auctions, we have real estate agents who highlight the prestige of the Beaumont Estate. Now, although the east side of the street is not covered by the heritage overlay, those residents also go to great lengths to preserve the original streetscape. Two of these houses have been completely rebuilt. The original clinker bricks have been cleaned down and reused in order to recreate the original appearance. I think that tells us something. Many residents have lived in these homes for 30, 40 and more years. Turnover is therefore very, very slow. But recently there was a rare auction of a house on the eastern side, which of course is not covered by the overlay, and a woman from Camberwell was looking to downsize, and she remarked to my wife, "I had no idea such a marvellous precinct existed in this area. It's magical." When told of the heritage overlay situation, she was incredulous. She said, "That's like being half pregnant. It makes no sense at all. The whole street obviously needs to be included." So that's what we're seeking from the council. We urge you to rectify this flaw in the heritage overlay. At stake are only 30 houses. We understand your imperatives, but in this case, please do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Normal council rules are that we have 3 for and 3 against. There is no speakers against the petition tonight. I'm sorry for any confusion I may have caused today, but I thought it was important that we let people who would like to speak, so we'll allow the other 3 or 4 speakers. So Franco Marcini, would you like to speak? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm from Lantana Street. My home is part of the Beaumont Estate, and I've been a proud resident here for over 25 years, only 25 years. I've moved here because I fell in love with the character and architecture of the homes. The unique appeal you've heard about the Beaumont Estate and our neighbourhood is something I deeply cherish. I was very surprised to learn that the heritage protection only existed on one side of Malcolm Road, as clearly the consistent Jennings homes on both sides define the character of the Beaumont Estate. And for that reason, I'm advocating for the acceptance of the petition. I'm very concerned about the proposed housing strategy, which shows zoning as incremental change to the east side of Malcolm Road. These changes threaten our neighbourhood. The very reason that drew me and many others to this area are under threat. By allowing things like three-storey dwellings and other out-of-character development, we risk eroding the distinct identity of our community. So to protect what makes our neighbourhood special, I urge all councillors to support the petition and our request for minimal change on the east side of Malcolm Road and Meryton Lane. This would ensure we can preserve the character that residents like myself value so much. It's concerning to me that the council wants to vote on this tonight with what, certainly in my view anyway, has been with potentially lack of adequate community input. I learned about this by accident, only because I ran into my neighbour walking one of our dogs and he told me about it. So I would ask you all to demonstrate that you prioritise residents' concerns by listening to us tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Franco. The next speaker, Robert Tutton. Is Robert there? Welcome, Robert. Thank you.
A bit slow, I've got a crook hip. Is this on? Yeah, okay. Good evening, esteemed members of the council, committee and fellow community members. My name's Robert Tutton and I am to speak on behalf of the Malcolm Road situation. Tonight I'm here to advocate for the implementation of a heritage overlay, as the others have said, for the east side of Malcolm Road and Meryton Lane, item 2.1. Our community has shown strong support for this initiative. We have petitions, meetings, endorsements, which have been submitted to council. Imagine half of this street being demolished and replaced with a three-storey construction of any kind. This would mark the end of the vision created by A.V. Jennings, who designed these classical red brick homes with small front red fences and generous gardens. Such changes would not only alter the architectural character of the entire street, but also impact the lives of these people who live there. Now, you, our trusted councillors of Banyule, will you have the courage to support our belief that this is our heritage to preserve? This is our chance to maintain and honour our history for the present generation and for all those to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Well spoken. Our next speaker is Sue Greaves. Welcome, Sue.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of Malcolm Road. We've lived there since the mid-1980s. And when we moved in, we were advised that it was in a heritage overlay area. I immediately thought, why is only one side of the street heritage overlay? Although our house was signalled out as a nice example of a small Spanish mission domestic home. It's the only home on that side of the street, apart from Jennings' original offices, 6 to 8 Malcolm Road, that are heritage listed. I approached council on this and said that a streetscape didn't consist of just one side of the street while you ignored the other side. And I was advised that if I wanted to collect signatures from all the residents and approach council, they would consider it. Being a new resident and much younger than many of the residents at that stage, which were the original owners who built their homes, I didn't feel it was appropriate to, I guess, make waves. It's fortunate that the street has maintained its streetscape. The fences, the homes are still basically intact. Real estate agents classify it as a beautiful street. I think it's just essential that we reconsider this and include both sides of the street in the heritage overlay. Currently there is inconsistency in the sense that our house, number 26, is included as incremental, while Jenny's home, 6 to 8 Milcombe Road, is included as a minimal change. This should change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. And our final speaker is Jane Crone. Welcome, Jane.
Well, thank you. I'm amazed because I was told I wasn't speaking tonight on either of the items. So I fully support this petition. The neighbourhood character of this precinct is heritage, and heritage is its neighbourhood character. You can't split the two. The significance of the Beaumont precinct must not continue to be based on the 2008 Context Proprietary Limited Heritage Review. It's out of date and it places far too much emphasis on the cul-de-sac layout of the west side of the street. It ignores its overall significance that obviously relates visually to both sides. The estate has similar neighbourhood attributes to that of the Heritage Victoria registered Walter Burley Griffin estates, where as well as its much admired and recognised town planning layout of curved roads around internal parks, it also is about its outstanding neighbourhood character, very similar to the Beauview estate, where single dwelling covenants on the Walter Burley Griffin estate have protected its large, beautiful established gardens with their original low stone retaining walls. Now, the covenant also requires that side and rear fences are in transparent material. Most properties also have no or low front fences, like the Art Deco estate, ensuring that Griffin's vision of a free-flowing garden atmosphere survive, although developers continually attempt to ignore the controls. Now, I'm requesting council that an interim heritage control must immediately be introduced, while urgent reassessment is undertaken under council's adopted heritage strategy. It's not too late, but it soon will be. I've been on 2 Art Deco walks with the Banyule Heritage Tours when we've come through this building itself, up the clock tower, but we've also walked those estates, and that shows how important they are. And the Heidelberg Historical Society has helped me, and I've given this out to some of the people in the group. It's the brochure of the Beauview homes. It has the map, and it shows from the 30s the estates on both sides of the road. It's clearly marked and cross-hatched. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for all our speakers tonight. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Champion?
Thanks, Mayor. I do have a question of the appropriate officer, if that's okay. My understanding of a heritage overlay on a dwelling restricts the ability of the inhabitant, the owner, to renovate it, look after it, renew it over decades, that sort of thing. In Sherborne Ward, we have individual properties that are have a heritage overlay on them. So this is a little bit different. This is a whole street or precinct. So I wanted to understand, does the implication of a heritage overlay or the heritage overlay on a whole precinct, does that lead to the possible devaluing of a property or each of the properties like it might if it were an individual property in the market?
Natasha, would you kindly respond?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I'd caveat by starting by saying I'm not a property valuer, so I certainly wouldn't give valuation advice. There's much researched and read about the impact of heritage controls over properties. Much of it indicates little to no impact all the way through to significant impact on property values. Heritage precincts do appear to have a positive effect on property values, something about the context of sitting within a precinct of similar buildings. But I'd suggest that much like many things that impact property value, personal choice and preference equally plays a part. So I think there is neither evidence for nor against that's particularly compelling.
And having a heritage overlay in a precinct doesn't prevent people from renewing their properties. They just have to respect the heritage as part of any work they do there. So it's not like you can't touch them, but you have to respect the heritage value before you do any work. Any other questions? I look for a councillor to move a motion. Councillor McKern, seconded. Councillor Costello. Comment?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to our petitioners, our signatories to the petition, of which there were 200 signatures, 151 of which are from Banyule residents. And thank you to tonight's speakers. And
excuse me, Mayor. Sorry, Councillor. Could we please go through the recommendations by the mover? Because we did go through the mover and the seconder very quickly. So I would like to see the mover move the item and then the seconder give us all an opportunity to second the item if possible.
There's no change to the recommendation per the papers.
I understand that, but the ability to be able to second and not just have it a given would be, I think, something that I would like to have been given the opportunity to second.
Councillor Costello seconded.
I understand that, Mayor, but there was no opportunity given to any other councillor.
I beg to differ. I think people had the opportunity to put their hand up and Councillor Costello put his hand up to second it first. Continue, Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to you, Mayor, for generously allowing so many speakers to speak on this item. In my opinion, your efforts represent an outstanding interest in protecting the architectural heritage of about 21 houses that form part of the A.V. Jennings Beaumont estate on the east side of Malcolm Road, and you're to be commended. Fellow councillors, we know that over the past few months, these local residents, including a local heritage architect, have emailed information to councillors detailing evidence for inclusion of the east side of Malcolm Road to be on council's heritage register with a heritage overlay. And they've also expressed their grave concerns, as we've heard tonight, about the subject area being earmarked an incremental housing change area in the draft housing strategy that would allow the subject heritage interwar style homes to be demolished and replaced with contemporary medium density dwellings up to 3 stories. So I fully appreciate your concerns. Albeit we are receiving the petition this evening and not debating its merits, in light of the draft housing strategy and neighbourhood character strategy being on tonight's agenda, to which this item is related, I will say this. Preserving Banyule's heritage architecture, whether it be pre, inter or post-war, makes a valuable contribution to the unique character and identity of all our city. In relation to the subject site, it is clearly stated on page 79 of the draft neighbourhood character strategy that an objective is retention of existing interwar dwellings that contribute to character. As such, we need to take resident concerns seriously. When possible, loss of heritage is brought to our attention. Why, fellow councillors? It is essential that we work conscientiously to retain the heritage and character of an area, because once it is gone forever. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak?
Hang on. I'd just like to acknowledge and thank all those that have provided feedback about Malcolm Road. I can see it's dear to many people's hearts, particularly Con, Stephen and Richard, who's not here tonight, I think. The guided tour you took me on really drew my attention to some of the qualities that many of you have written to us about the low front fencing that welcomes a community, and the generous gardens. There's so many qualities of that estate that I would love to see across Banyule, and so many of the new dwellings don't create that community environment. It's an exceptional place, and I congratulate you bringing this to our attention, and I'm looking forward to seeing further information on this, and I'd just like to congratulate you all for representing that very precious part of Banyule so well.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Garotti.
Wrong button. Yeah, look, just wanted to thank all the speakers and in particular as well all the residents who've contacted council. We've certainly received the emails, heard the message. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go out and have a tour of the site, but I've been in close contact with Alida, the local councillor, as well as Councillor Castaldo. I certainly feel well across the issue. I note in the next agenda item, there'll hopefully be an opportunity for council to consider and address that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Di Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just thank you to the speakers and thank you for everyone who contacted councillors. And also, Mayor, thank you for your discretion for hearing from the extra speakers tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Champion.
Thank you very much for speaking, for all of you speaking and all of you emailing. I personally have really appreciated this. I have learnt a lot about this road and this lane. I did go down it, so thank you for the invitation to walk and go for a tour over the weekend. I did actually go down it last week, so I can appreciate the beautiful architecture that's in the road, as in a lot of Ivanhoe. A lot of Ivanhoe and Eaglemont have the most beautiful homes, and there's a lot of attention to detail in their structure. So they are very, very special. So, and I really do appreciate you love where you live, and that's paramount. Hearing that you have lived in your homes for decades and looked after them for so long is a credit. It's an absolute credit, and you sound like you all actually like each other and get on really well, which is great. That's a great community. I asked the question about heritage overlay because I am conscious, certainly as an individual property, buyers of the property are put off by not being able to have freedom to renovate as they want for their own lives. And that can actually devalue a property. So to hear that there's a possibility of a precinct undergoing a heritage overlay actually adds value is a good thing. I'm positive, so that's a positive thing that I'm happy to hear. So I will take into account, feel free to continue to email us. I did read all your emails, okay? I have read all of them. So please feel free to keep in touch, but we will watch this closely, and thank you all for taking the time to write to us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? I'd just like to thank the residents for bringing this to our attention and all the emails. I did ride my bike up and down a couple of times, had a good look the other week, but sorry I couldn't take the invitation. My son got married over the weekend and I was trying to keep the in-laws apart, so that kept me busy. So thank you for your hard work and bringing this to our attention. It's much appreciated. I'll put that. All those in favour? That is carried. We'll move on to item 6.1, the adoption of the proposed housing strategy and neighbourhood character strategy. There are several speakers. The first speaker is Pippa Griffiths. Welcome, Pippa. I haven't seen her, actually. Oh, there she is. Welcome, Pippa. Thank you. You have 2 minutes.
The adoption of these strategies should be deferred. We have two different issues which should be separate items on the agenda. It's important they're developed together and that they support each other, but all council strategies should support each other. Each document needs more work. The housing strategy identifies land for future housing development, but nothing for the future infrastructure things council needs to provide in order to ensure the livability of the more densely populated areas. Heidelberg Major Activity Centre is a good example of council not protecting or enhancing livability for current residents. People are moving in all the time as developments are completed and a lot more developments are planned. But there is not enough green open space at the western end, and what green space there is not easily accessible for many residents. There are no easily accessible community facilities, and council is selling off the only existing one in Horden Street and also selling a site at 1 Stradbroke Avenue that was to be a civic hub very close to the station. Council has policies about enhancing livability, but these actions are contrary to those policies, as nothing is provided in their place. Any future facility, even if the decision were on today's agenda, is years away from being available for use. Just one example in the neighbourhood character is a key threat. The loss of mature canopy trees is identified in the key threats for only a few precincts. As we are rapidly losing many of these canopy trees across Banyule, it should be specified in more precincts. Once these canopy trees are gone, they're gone, and we won't see their like again. If we finalise these documents too soon, we will have to live with the consequences for years. Discussions at the recent planning panel for the Heidelberg Major Activity Centre reinforced for me how important the wording of these documents is, and I never want to be at a VCAT hearing again to hear that a development doesn't have to be good. We should not be accepting anything less than good. We owe it to current and future residents to get this right. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'd also like to thank all the other residents who've been working with me on these issues, particularly Alicia Curry, who came to the planning panel as well, Robin, Jane, Tanya, Jane and John Walkley. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I notice Alicia was down to speak, but she's unwell, and so is Michelle. So thank you for that, Pippa. Our next speaker is David Hay. David, welcome, David.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, officers. I'd just like to start off by putting these two draft proposals in some sort of context. And the context that I see in them is within the statewide Engage Victoria draft housing targets, which are leading up to 2.2 million new houses in the state by 2051. Now, that's about the length of time that Banyule has existed, just to put that into some sort of context. Banyule has been given a target of an additional 47,000 houses, which I think is about 86% of the existing number. I also note that the Minister for both Development and Precincts, the Honourable Colin Brooks, is a lead player in driving this. And Mayor, he sat once in the seat that you're sitting in right now, as you're well aware. The two strategies, I believe, provide tools to achieve the state targets whilst retaining our own Banyule's district preferred living character values. To maintain character, what is it that we need to protect? Amongst other things, two things stand out for me. The impacts of development on specific character precincts, which I'm calling cultural heritage, and environmental protection of biodiversity values. Page 50 of the housing structure defines 4 change area definitions: minimal change, incremental change, increased change, and substantial change. And we've heard speakers talking about some of the distinctions and where they live within the policies. Page 22 of the Neighbourhood Character Strategy defines 14 precincts spread between 5 neighbourhood character types. The descriptor of this notes that there are minor boundary changes in Urban Character 1 precinct for the inclusion of an additional area of land in Greensborough. That's the area of my interest. I happen to live in that area. The importance of this change is the relevance to habitat linkages, the linkage from the Plenty River to Creswell Forest along Sweetwater Creek. Banyule Urban Forest Strategy requires minimum canopy cover of 30% by 2050. And I note that to grow a full height canopy cover trees isn't something that happens overnight. So everyone that disappears, as one of the other speakers has said, has to be replaced, and it won't be replaced adequately within that 50 years. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, David. Well spoken. And the next speaker is Lucas Moore, who's speaking against the policy. Welcome, Lucas.
This on? Yep. All right. I'd like to speak against the development plan and how it applies to West Heidelberg. As part of my campaign for council election with Victorian Socialists, I've door-knocked every house in West Heidelberg over the past couple of months. During this time, I have not met a single person who has been consulted about council's plan to rezone much of the area for substantial change. When informed, I've not met a single person who supports it. Council's plan justifies rezoning much of the area on the basis of being close to activity centres. Can council tell me where these activity centres are? Because if you actually lived in the area, you know there are none. There's a couple of shops on Waterdale Road, there's Olympic Village, which council have left to deteriorate, and then there's the Mall, which has also largely been left to deteriorate for decades. There's also no high-frequency public transport. I would not describe a few buses as high frequency, and if you've ever tried to catch the 250 bus, you'll know what I'm talking about. With the amount of development council is allowing in the area, you'd think we lived right next to a train line. Well, we're not Ivanhoe or Burgundy Street. We're not right near a train station. We don't have a thriving area of pubs, shops, services that is ready to accommodate a few more people. This plan, in my view, just dumps more hardship and stress on what is already a struggling working class community. We have a right, like everyone in Banyule, to privacy, quiet enjoyment, light, tree cover, nature and wildlife. Overdevelopment is already creating major issues in the neighbourhood. With the stress, noise and hazards of construction, along with the issues of traffic congestion, lack of parking, rubbish collection issues, loss of tree canopy, lack of schools and other facilities, I could go on. One specific example is parking and development around Al Sadiq Mosque, which is already causing a major source of frustration in the community for worshippers and residents, and one that is not addressed in council's plan. If council is set on going ahead with this strategy, what new services or facilities are they planning for West Heidelberg to accommodate our booming population? Rather than giving the green light for more rampant overdevelopment, council needs to be protecting the existing community in West Heidelberg and our neighbourhood character, holding on to what public housing we have left, firmly advocating for more to be built, and working with the state government to make sure the services, amenities, regulations and infrastructure are in place to support a larger population before we ramp up development even more.
Lucas,
Otherwise, we risk...
Lucas,
I've just got one sentence left. Otherwise, we risk building the slums of the future and creating a new generation of disadvantage in West Heidelberg and other areas of Banyule. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Stephen Cullen. Welcome, Stephen. I know we didn't put you to last just for any particular reason.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick, Mayor. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak at Council on the housing strategy and its impact on the Beaumont estate. Clear evidence exists that Beaumont is a significant asset of Banyule. This housing strategy puts at real risk the degrading or destruction of this valuable and significant Banyule heritage asset. Many documents, some of which some of the earlier speakers have referenced, and more, and the evidence of what exists in the street today, which some councillors came out and saw firsthand, and I want to thank those councillors who took the time to come and have a look at it, shows clearly that Beaumont character and architecture exists on the east side. Also on the west side, not just inside the courts, but in Malcolm Road and also in the west side courts. Whilst reviews call out the Western Courts as part of the reason for the protection in the past of Malcolm Road, just as many, if not more, Jennings architectural elements are also cited in those reviews. These collectively characterise the Beaumont estate, a valued asset on the Banyule community character balance sheet. The housing strategy is a comprehensive piece of work and council should be commended for it. But the change zoning anomaly on page 52 and the consequential change guide on page 51 of the housing strategy points to the impact on Malcolm Road and the impact to the potential degrading of the Beaumont character heritage. Malcolm Road runs down the middle of the Jennings Beaumont estate. It did from the very start in 1937, and that is very clear. The characteristics on the west, both in and outside the courts, are the same as the east. Both sides of the street should be classified minimal change in the housing strategy on the change area map, not just the western side. Mayor, on behalf of the residents, including some 40 here in the gallery tonight, we respectfully ask Council to vote for an adjustment to the classification, as I've outlined, before advancing the housing strategy further. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Stephen. That concludes the speakers.
Being refused the chance to speak.
I sneaked you in one. Yes, Jane, you can speak if you really want to speak.
Well, I do, and I put my name down and I have my signed stamped piece of paper. I've grave concerns that the state government's present agenda for greatly increased inner suburban housing density will further result in a loss of vegetation, heritage and of most concern, neighbourhood character. So although it's not necessarily heritage tonight, you can't have one without the other in this case. Council is governed, it's not their fault, by weak and difficult to enforce state government controls that is causing the destruction of neighbourhoods. Council's new zone for increased housing developments that now applies to the east side of Malcolm Road puts at great risk the rare and architecturally intact Art Deco interface that exists on both sides of Malcolm Road. Council zone change now allows for increased housing development, which will result in the destruction of the visionary neighbourhood character of this much admired, loved, rare and intact A.V. Jennings Beaumont estate. With its original Art Deco houses, garages and low front brick fences that result in attractive, free-flowing and harmonious front gardens and streetscapes. I've printed evidence, which I showed you, courtesy of the Heidelberg Historical Society, that clearly shows on a map in the 1939 A.V. Jennings promotional booklet titled Beauview Homes that the Beaumont estate exists on both sides of Malcolm Road. It notes that there are 94 completed homes, the total of which would account for the number of Art Deco homes on both sides of Malcolm Road. The booklet includes plans, drawings and photographs advertising the Beaumont estate. Council must remove its new density east side zoning and replace it with an interim heritage control that is later completed with any required additional work. This zoning anomaly must be rectified immediately if Council is really serious about protecting its heritage and neighbourhood character. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And Wendy Pallister also requested to speak. I know she was advised that we'd seen Luke, but I think in question of fairness, I think we should give Wendy the opportunity to speak if she'd still like to. I'm sure I did see her before. She must have left. And Sue, would you like another opportunity to speak to this item as well? You did put your name down.
When I first read the draft housing strategy and draft neighbourhood character strategy, I was impressed by the quotes in it, and I'll just quote a couple of things. New development will be sustainable, well designed and responsive to our unique leafy green neighbourhoods. Another one was all housing development will enhance our vegetation cover and present a pleasant interface with the street. Both draft strategies have similar positive and encouraging statements that highlight Council's support of good design, enhanced vegetation, improved amenity, eco-friendly initiatives, sustainability. However, the reality is, in my opinion, that these qualities are simply not evident in the vast majority of current or past developments. My concern is that multi-storey developments, especially on main roads, have no setback, no vegetation, and the retail shops underneath are simply billboards for large businesses. Multi-unit developments have no space to plant a tree of any significant size, and mock French chateau homes, are these in keeping with the neighbourhood character? I believe the document is an impressive vision statement, but it has consistent language that includes preferred and encouraged. For example, developers will be encouraged to adopt good design. I believe council must include specific requirements and mandatory standards, and the document needs to be quite specific in what it allows and does not allow. And council must truly commit to ensuring that the integrity and intent of the document is followed through. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sue. We fully agree, but it's difficult to get those controls. So, Wendy, welcome, Wendy.
Good evening, councillors, Mayor, CEO. Wasn't prepared for this because I was told I wasn't going to speak on it. So it's just really regarding the email I sent you regarding the zoning at the top of Heidelberg Heights there, that the residential homes, it's new, what I would describe as GRZ5 zoning with the new residential properties in there. I sent a photo of that, but it's been put in the ACZ2, which is questionable. So I'd like you to look at that zoning for that area because it is 1 and 2 stories and to protect that area. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Wendy. So are there any questions from councillors? Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in relation to the last speaker, Wendy's comments, could, through you, the Director of City Development comment on her comment regarding zoning, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I believe Wendy might be referring to the zoning changes that are part of Amendments C172, which is the Heidelberg Structure Plan. That's obviously recently been presented to a planning panel, and we await the outcome of that panel report. That will come back to Council for consideration in due course, and the concerns raised in relation to the various zones that have been proposed could certainly be considered at that time.
Further, Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just had a question of officers because it came up in a few of the comments that were raised by speakers. But it's just a question around when council will have an opportunity to formally engage on the housing targets that have been set by the state government. And in particular, will there be an agenda or a report coming to this council for consideration? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, Council will receive a report at the next August Council meeting, which I believe is the 26th of August, hoping that's the right date, which will have attached to it a suggested submission to not just the housing targets, but to the consultation around the Plan Victoria principles that the state government has been exhibiting.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Castaldo.
Yeah, just a quick question through you, Mayor, of the Director of City Developments. This is going to be a strategy that we may adopt tonight, but there's a lot of very important work to flow after this. Could you speak to some of the important stages, if we adopt this tonight, that we'll need to get on with and start realising what this strategy says to do?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I guess in brief, this is the first stage of the delivery of work. So following the adoption of these strategies, that would set the path for officers to begin the development of our residential development framework. And it's through that work that some of the detail comes to life in terms of zoning changes, applications of overlays, modifications to schedules of zones, new policies, and certainly the time at which we would consider things like standards and whether or not they be mandatory or discretionary depending on our powers. So that's a large body of work that effectively gives force and implementation to the strategies that have been adopted.
Councillor McKern.
Thank you. Through you, I'd just like to ask a quick question of the Director of City Development. Just with respect to reporting back to Council on feedback to the State Government on the draft housing targets, do we have to observe the deadline, which I believe is the 30th of August, or do local government agencies have a bit of leeway?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Our understanding is the closing date is published as the 31st of August, and I've seen statements by the State Department that submissions can be received up to the beginning of caretaker period. So we could certainly seek clarity. It is commonplace for us to seek a modest extension of time if we felt more time was required to consider any submissions.
Thank you. I'll look for a councillor move. Councillor McKern, you have an amendment, I believe. Would you like to read your amendment out?
Is that better? Yep. Can everyone read the proposed amendments?
No.
I'll read it for you then.
But maybe lean in.
That's better. Okay. The first is 2A, or rather 2, adopt the Housing Strategy 2024 in accordance with Attachment 1, subject to the following changes. 2A, in the Housing Change Map, show residential properties on Warrawee Drive, Judith Street and Patricia Avenue, inclusive of Grimshaw Street, Bundoora, identified as substantial change as increased change. 2B, in the Housing Change Map, show residential properties on Ambrose Treacy Drive, Bundoora, identified as substantial change as increased change. 2C, in the Housing Change Map, show residential properties on Ambrose Treacy Drive, Bundoora, identified as increased change as incremental change on. Does that make sense?
It would be on.
On. We just governance might include the word on between change and the Housing Change Map. Show residential properties which are outside the Ivanhoe. No, that doesn't make sense with all due respect.
You're moving it, Councillor.
Yes, well, it needs to make sense for me to move it. And outside the Ivanhoe major activity, no, that pertains to this one here. That's actually, that shouldn't read outside the Ivanhoe major activity.
I'm sorry to the gallery, we've had a bit of a blip.
Ivanhoe major activity is here, so there's been a repetition.
Can that be deleted? So then after map, we delete the rest.
Yes.
Yep.
So after, with due respect, governance, through you, Mayor, if 2C could delete after change map, please delete show residential properties which are outside the Ivanhoe major activity, because that actually belongs in the following clause. And once that's deleted, I'll reread it.
Sorry to the gallery, but it is important that we get this correct, because what's adopted tonight will be the resolution of council.
Right, that's how it's meant to be. No, that's correct. No, that's right, Rick. He's saying invert them, but that's correct.
No.
Increased change is incremental.
Correct.
No, it is correct, with all due respect. Oh, he wants inverted commas. With due respect, through yourself, Mayor, if governance could include inverted commas around increased and the words increased and incremental in 2C. Is that, you happy with that? And we might continue. I'll reread 2C. In the housing change map, show residential properties on Ambrose Treacy Drive, Bundoora, identified as increased change as incremental change on the housing change map. Thank you. 2D. In the housing change map, show residential boundaries which are outside the Ivanhoe Major Activity Centre boundary and on Green Street, Dudley Street, Langs Road, Ashby Grove, Townsend Street, Rotherwood Road, Thorsby Grove, Maltravers Road, Silverdale Road and Dick Street, Ivanhoe, identified as increased change as incremental change. 2E. In the housing change map, show residential properties on the east side of Malcolm Road from Lantana Street to number 10 Malcolm Road, identified as incremental change as minimal change. 2F. Revise NC4, NC standing for neighbourhood character, to read, investigate appropriate locations for the application of the NCO, which refers to neighbourhood character overlay, that ensures new buildings and works meet the NC objectives of the area and that architectural styles by way of older dwellings contributing to the NC of the area are retained. We'll just move on. And 2G, in the process of implementing the Banyule Heritage Strategy 2024, update the housing strategy to reflect any new heritage areas as minimal housing change areas. There should be some additional amendments.
That come up on the next page.
Excellent. Point 8. Write to and engage with state and federal government representatives regarding the provision of key infrastructure and services such as schools, public open space, public transport, roads and bike paths to support increasing dwelling and population density in Banyule. Point 9. Review Council's 10-year capital works program to ensure that it future-proofs council-controlled infrastructure to meet projected population and housing needs. Point 10. Monitor dwelling and population forecasts and actual growth and receive an interim report within 3 years. And point 11, receive a report that investigates the options to introduce the in-house ability to provide for digital analysis of visual impacts of proposed developments. So moved.
Moved Councillor McKern, seconded Councillor Grotti. Comment?
Tonight, Council is being asked to adopt the housing and neighbourhood character strategies. The housing strategy will set the landscape for development and opportunities for the next 15 years. Why? Because the state government requires council to ensure at least a 15-year supply of housing. The last time we updated the housing strategy was in 2009, so the review is considered timely. The draft housing strategy aims to guide increase in housing supply, particularly with regards to affordability and diversity, and to accommodate our growing population. A pressure we are facing is the recent release of draft state government housing targets. Banyule currently has about 53,000 dwellings, and we're being asked to increase this number by 47,000, which represents an increase of about 86%. State government's key criteria for informing the location of new housing includes access to existing public transport infrastructure, especially rail and bus routes, access to jobs and services like shops and schools. Consequently, what we see in the proposed housing change map is that most of the proposed increased housing density occurs along our main public transport routes. Council has heard residents' concerns of increased population and subsequent increase in housing density that include unsustainable pressures on existing infrastructure, increased congestion, which in some parts of the city is very significant, and loss of heritage buildings, loss of neighbourhood character, and reduced livability of our suburbs. I think these are legitimate concerns. Therefore, this council argues that if a new plan is to be made for Banyule, as it is for other parts of Victoria, grey and green infrastructure must be updated and increased to support population growth. Henceforth, the amendments presented tonight speak to this. One of the proposed amendments of the draft housing strategy is to revise some of the proposed increased change areas in Grimshaw, Griffin and Chelsworth wards to incremental change. By way of example, Ivanhoe, where increased density has been proposed in a number of quiet residential streets, is already carrying 45% of its housing stock as apartments and townhouses. Ivanhoe has the lowest percentage of standalone houses in Banyule and is suffering from high traffic congestion and overutilisation of existing services and facilities. Yet other parts of our city are also on principal public transport routes and have less than 2% apartments and 80 to 100% freestanding single dwellings. Yes, we need to increase housing supply, diversity and affordability, but we also need to encourage livability and neighbourhood character. And that's what these amendments attempt to address. I think councillors are doing their best to provide for targets which should align with one another and not be competing interests. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Just for the benefit of the gallery, could I ask the Director of City Development to explain what the impact of those recommendations, please?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. The changes make adjustments to the housing change map. So they effectively change the category areas that we put in place. This will then flow through to the review of the current zoning and overlays that apply to land, and we would then marry up any changes that are made. So we'd review, for example, in the case of Malcolm Street, we would review what the zoning is, for example, on that eastern side, and we would align that with the housing change map areas, and any changes that come as a consequence of that would then form part of a future planning scheme amendment.
So the impact would that be there would be much less likelihood of development on the east side of Malcolm Road?
Through you, Mayor, that probably has two parts to it. The housing strategy looks broadly at the underlying zoning of the land and its capacity, so it's likely that might shift the underlying zoning. There's a second piece of work which the petition has called for that was in the earlier item on the agenda that asked for consideration of the application of a heritage overlay. Those two would work in concert, but the zoning would change likely in terms of what is permitted there, regardless of whether the heritage overlay is applied or not, because they're two separate instruments that manage how land is developed.
Thank you. Councillor Grotti, you had some...
Yeah, Mayor, I just had a question and then comments, but it's just a process-based question for the appropriate director. In the event, and it just reflects upon comments made by one of the earlier speakers in the Heidelberg West context, but in the event that a future council, what would be the mechanism potentially for a future council to revisit this housing strategy on the basis that, you know, for example, further feedback comes in from the community over the coming months once they understand the final strategy? What, if any, mechanism is there for a council to revisit this, just from a process perspective?
Through you, Mayor, normally these strategies are reviewed every 10 to 15 years, so they're not a strategy that's necessarily reviewed regularly. That said, there can be causes for us to review zoning and overlay of land that come up at any point in time with new information as it becomes available. A good example of that might be if there's future consideration of things like land that might be identified as being environmentally significant or having other challenges like flooding or other impacts. Those sorts of changes to zoning and overlays happen in the course of that time, but the broad strategic objectives that are set out in the housing strategy tend to have a longevity to them.
Thank you. Look, happy to make a couple of comments. So I think the advice that we've received as a councillor group is that the amendments that are put forward will still enable the council to meet its targets under state government. while responding to community needs. So I think that's an important observation to make. In regard to the amendments around the Bundoora, Motsonia North areas, it was just about looking to achieve an appropriate level of development. For example, if anyone knows it, Ambrose Tracy Drive, it's one way in, one way out onto Plenty Road. There's already an apartment complex there on the corner. So to be sort of suggesting that we're going to have substantial change in the area, I think would leave residents pondering, well, what's council looking to do there? Put a 10, 20-storey apartment? No, there's already an apartment block there, and so we're just reflecting that that is the situation. And likewise, just the amendments around the Andrews Place, toning it down a little bit, because potentially, as it was there in the draft strategy, you could have an apartment block potentially going in there. I don't think that the area is ready for that. I don't think that's appropriate for Bundoora and Motsonia North. I hope that the gallery is able to recognise, and many from the Ivanhoe area, that there's been a number of amendments put through or proposed that respond to the feedback that we've been receiving by email, by phone call, and I really do want to thank the residents for that, and I hope that you can hear that we've heard and listened and responded to a degree. And the third thing that I just wanted to touch on was the amendments 8 to 11. They're really around the broader strategic issues that now associated with the housing, and in particular the community, the infrastructure, hard infrastructure, soft community infrastructure that we're going to need to get put into Banyule in order to respond to that increase in population and housing. So it's about beginning a conversation with state and federal governments and their representatives in the area, but it's also about council looking at our own 10-year strategy and saying, well, what are we doing? Do we need to review that? Do we need to be doing more? Because we're talking some big numbers here. And I think it was just important to highlight, as well as Director Swan pointed out, at our next council meeting, we will be considering council's formal response to the housing strategy targets. And I think that does open up a conversation with the community. So we certainly look forward to some input and feedback around that. But at the end of the day, we need to have a housing strategy, and we do need to have these targets, because we need to be in a position to work with government. Otherwise, our planning controls and arrangements might be taken away from us. We, as a council, want to be in control of our destiny on behalf of the community to the maximum degree possible, and this strategy supports us in doing that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor De Morelos.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a big document. You know, it's got some positive impacts. Obviously, the increased housing supply is something that's obviously being pushed at the moment by the state government and all people. There's sustainable development positive impact with concentration on taller buildings around public transport would be the goal. And amenities can reduce the need for car dependency, which is always nice. There's also the potential of economic development. With higher density housing can attract more businesses and services, especially around that, you know, those certain precincts like the Latrobe cluster. But there's also negative impacts. So there's neighbourhood character, as we've heard from a lot of speakers tonight. Tonight I am going to be speaking around Olympia Ward specifically. I know it is my job as a councillor to consider all of Banyule, but tonight I'll be highlighting my specific ward where I was elected. And really the increased building heights have been severely impacting 3081. Now, the state government has allowed for this area to be a growth corridor, and by all means, that has been where the concentration of this entire strategy has been. These taller buildings are going to affect a lot of those streets. Some of those streets where we're proposing huge changes are one way up, one way down. There's an infrastructure burden to residents. I know many residents, and I'll ask for more time today. Mayor, if that's okay. There are infrastructure burdens for a lot of the residents. Maybe not developers, but just mum and dads looking to increase their house, maybe put 2 properties on one house if they can. This higher population is going to increase the traffic congestion. We're seeing that currently at Bell Street with so many apartments going in, and you know, we look at the State Department not offering any solutions to Bell Street, and that does fall back on council. This also is going to potentially impact the quality of life for a lot of residents with such high development. Let alone public schools, the amenities in the area, whether it's the health department. State government is cutting funding to a lot of services for that local community in Heidelberg West. This is further going to put more pressures on that area. We're seeing more high-rises go up. We're seeing more people come into the area. They need those services. So as council, we try and put a strategy in place, but we're trying to create a strategy for the state government who's not providing the services or the strategy. Now, in this case, the state government has created a draft plan for 47,000 dwellings. Draft plan. Us as council tonight are being requested to adopt a neighbourhood character, a strategy for housing prior to that adoption of that plan from a state side of things. Again, we're talking about 53,000 extra dwellings. There's the suburban rail loop that's going to be coming in by 2050. There's no mention how that's going to impact this. Again, this strategy is really developed around that growth strategy for this area. I acknowledge the residents that have raised concerns when they feel this growth is too much. There's some residents that can't, that don't know, as one of the speakers mentioned tonight. The challenge that lies in balancing the need for increased housing with the preservation of neighbourhood character and environmental sustainability, continuous monitoring and adjustments to the strategy would be necessary. And that may be when there's new information that's come about, hence the draft plan that's been proposed by the state government.
Councillor, would you mind summing up?
Yeah, thank you. As local councillor for the Olympia Ward, I can't support this, as I do not feel that it's actually ambitious enough for Banyule. That it isn't focusing on the main roads and the public transport hubs, the train stations, and where the services are. So I call to you councillors to consider not just one ward, but in this case Olympia Ward and Banyule, that this strategy isn't ambitious enough to focus on the main streets and where the public transport is. Lastly, I'd just like to commend the officers, because I do know how much work does go into a strategy, and I have noticed that there are some places that have been called back along Liberty Parade. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Castaldo.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone that's had a hand in making this strategy, the 2 strategies tonight. First Emma over there and the rest of the team sitting over by the door, and Natasha. And it's not just these staff, there's a whole lot that aren't with council anymore that contributed over the journey over the last couple of years as well. And it wasn't a consultation that just happened over the last couple of years. There's a lot of feedback that the staff brought into this consultation at the start. There's a response to communities' concerns that I've seen for many years before this strategy was started to be put together. So I'm grateful when I first saw it in the draft. It had attended to many of the very important areas. And this strategy isn't just resolved now that we've got this. There's a lot of work we've got to do in the coming years. And that's when the really important work is, where overlays to protect really important characteristics like front fencing, gardens and other things that bring our community together. And that's really where the neighbourhood character strategy really needs to get some teeth into our planning scheme. But I'm not going to say that this is a big, rosy, fantastic strategy. This is a strategy that responds to both state and federal decisions that we must have more population, bigger, bigger, bigger. When did we ever have the discussion that we want to design our city to be the best possible city, not just always accommodate more. We haven't had that discussion. We can't control the entire planning scheme as a council. I would love to do that. I don't think the strategy would look like it is now. But given those constraints that we have, I think this is a very good strategy. It sets us up for future years to work forward to protecting single house lots that now have no permit controls over and very little neighbourhood character ability to influence. We're going to have guidelines, we're going to have overlays, a range of things. So I'm looking forward to adopting this and then taking those next steps and protecting both these things but also the other elements, heritage raised tonight, all the residents around the Beauview estate. You bring attention to really important things. There's a lot of strategies, I think Pippa raised it. There's a lot of strategies that feed into every strategy. We can't bring them all together at once, but we are planning them ahead. And I think in some of the amendments that councillors that have gone a long way, a lot of conversations in the background, Alida and Rick, they've gone a long way to try and accommodate a lot of the concerns of the residents as well. So I think we've tried to show some of the next steps tonight, how we're going to move forward, but we've still got a lot of work to do.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Neely.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of my fellow councillors have said a few things that I was going to say, and I do appreciate the varied views across the room. I'll just mention a few different things. Well, one of them that has been mentioned was environmental considerations that are important to the community. We're listening to residents. I thank the residents for all their emails. They've been read and considered. And also residents in the northern part of the municipality, their concern is about the balance, getting the balance right. You know, we're close to doubling the amount of dwellings over the next 25, 30 years. And we are also trying to protect vegetation concurrently. So some residents, as you know, have welcomed a gradual shift in the neighbourhood character, whilst others would like it 100% retained, meaning no change. I understand concerns around disruptions. So it's been mentioned by speakers tonight, noise, traffic, congestion, lack of privacy, light pollution. They do mirror my own concerns and those residents of the north. Other concerns are around particularly a lack of on-street parking and the increased difficulty for council services to operate, like rubbish collections or street sweepers or other maintenance. I'd like to mention younger respondents to the consultation were worried about the housing affordability. I do think this strategy can address that in the future, but I do understand their concerns. We're at a point in Melbourne where single dwellings are increasingly unattainable for new home buyers, you know, potentially becoming a luxury. And access to housing, you know, as we know, is a basic human right. We want it to be comfortable. We want it to be easy to access transport, schools, recreation facilities and green spaces. So I hope this will lend to housing options for all life stages for people. And Councillor De Morelis, I would have welcomed some change to West Heidelberg. Thank you.
I'll just make a few comments before...
Can I speak as well, Mayor? Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Champion.
Thanks, Mayor. I won't take 2 minutes or 5, just to be clear. No, I'm just laughing at you, Councillor. That's all right. I just wanted to thank our residents who spoke this evening on this item. I'm referring to point number 8. I can hear that you as residents are aware there is a bigger picture. There are things out of council's control that come from other levels of government. And I certainly, for one, do appreciate that you are aware of what is happening in the housing framework that is coming. We do ask you to please write to our state and federal representatives. So we will be doing it, but we are asking you to do it as well so that they get the message that there's a limit. There's a limit on a variety of things, and the infrastructure is not strong enough or wide enough to be able to tolerate the amount of housing that they're expecting us to meet. So thank you very much for your contributions today, and thank you, Mayor, for letting Jane Crone speak at the end there.
Thank you. I'll just make a few quick comments there. I will support this tonight because we do need a plan, and I believe we can grow and still protect our character. We can grow and protect the livability and our heritage, but we can also protect the environment, improve our open spaces, but we can also provide the houses that people need. And we are a changing society and people's needs are changing. We cannot refuse to change and expect that people who want to downsize will be able to stay in the area. We can't expect our children to be able to afford to buy a standalone house in Banyule because it's simply unaffordable. So if we want our families to stay in Banyule, we need a variety of housing to suit people of all life stages, and I believe this plan addresses that. And if you think about it, the more dense we are in the right places, the more services we provide. And then with those services, we get choices and we get the variety of things we want to make our suburbs more livable. And then people don't need to drive elsewhere to get the services they need every day. And that's what density is all about. Density gives you choices. And if we get the density right, people have more choices. And sometimes people focus too much on the height. We need to worry more about what it looks like, in my opinion. Because a 4-storey ugly building is an ugly building. A 6-storey attractive building can add to the neighbourhood. Actually, and I know people probably cringe at that, but I'd much rather see an attractive building than an ugly building. And I think by getting the neighbourhood character controls right, we will force builders to make buildings that are attractive, not just to meet a dollar. So, and I'd like to thank the staff. I know it's been a huge effort by the staff. Difficult councillors to work with, and we're very lucky we have engaged residents. So thank you for all the people that have engaged. It's fantastic. But thank you to the staff for coming up for what I think is a very reasonable and acceptable plan for this council. Right, a reply, Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to my fellow councillors for engaging in this debate. It's right and proper that you should all have opinions on this because the adoption of these strategies will indeed affect us all. Now, we do have a declared housing crisis, and if we don't adopt a framework for future housing development in this city tonight, there's every chance that the state government will do it for us. We're all aware of these state government draft targets. They've been explained by a number of councillors. One of the things I do want to rebut is the comment that the strategy doesn't consider transport routes enough. With due respect, I've actually studied the PPTN, which is the Principal Public Transport Network. It is part of the Banyule Planning Scheme, available for everyone to have a look at. And I think that the proposed changes actually follow the PPTN quite closely. So that is where we are seeing the majority of change around our main transport network, and that is what is being asked of us. So I too would like to acknowledge the efforts of the staff. This has been a tremendously complex and quite a big project to work on. And whilst we may not have got it 100% right to suit the tastes of everyone, I think we've gone a long way to setting a framework that we can own and challenge in the future. I particularly like the comments around elevating ESD and elevating excellence in design outcomes. That's going to have to be a priority if we're going to have higher density that we can all live with and is commensurate with our neighbourhood character. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for sticking to the time. Well done. So I'll put that. All those in favour? That is against? That is carried. So we'll just have a little minute break if people would like to. People who are here for that item would like to take the opportunity to go home and have an early night. Thank you for your input and hope to see you again. Thank you, David. Thank you, Con. See ya. Thank you, everybody. What's that called? Thank you, everybody. Could you please be quiet? Shh. Sit down. We'll move on to item 2.2, the petition against the removal of greenery and trees across the road from the Banyule Recycling Centre. There are no speakers. I look for a councillor to move a motion. Moved, Councillor Garotti. Seconded, Councillor Neely. Comment? I'd just like to thank the officers for their work on the people that submitted this petition and having an ongoing conversation to ensure that these issues are resolved, which is, I think, the reason that the petitioners aren't here tonight. So I'd like to thank the officers for that. I'll put that. All those in favour? That is carried. We'll move on to item 3.1, the Audit and Risk Committee meetings and the biannual report. We have one speaker, Wendy Pallister. Like Wendy? That's you. You got 2 minutes, Wendy.
That's quick, right. Not quick enough. Okay, good evening everyone again. So I'm Wendy Palliser, I volunteer for James Reserve and advocate to preserve James Reserve. And I'm talking in general about the expenditure and referring to James Reserve irrigation installation this year. I believe there's been a lack of due diligence.
Mayor, I might pull up a point of order because I don't recall James Reserve featuring within the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting. Happy to stand corrected by officers.
No, it's
but
not.
Calling a point of order on that basis, Mayor.
Correct, but it's a general, but pointing out.
The role of the Audit Committee is not to question individual projects of this size. The Audit Committee looks at our books and makes sure that the processes are correct.
I guess that stands me down. Never mind.
Yes, I'm sorry. The Audit Committee doesn't talk about specific things. They look at the process, make sure the processes are correct. So thank you for your interest, but we don't go to that detail. So you can talk, but as long as it's referring to the item on the agenda.
Mayor, just recognising, just asking a question of the appropriate officers for a resident such as Ms Palliser, what would be the appropriate mechanisms for her to raise a query or question formally via the public to the council regarding some of her concerns around James Reserve?
Do you want to respond?
Through you, Mayor, the resident can raise a public question if she wants something heard at a council meeting. She can also contact inquiries at Banyule for a request to be considered, or she can write to myself or Natasha Swan. Yep.
And I notice Wendy does have a question in tonight's public question list. So we'll move. Are there any questions from councillors? Look for a councillor to move a motion. As per the papers, seconded, Councillor Garotti. Comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Before each Audit and Risk Committee meeting, the internal auditor meets the committee with council management present. And at the June 2024 meeting, the auditors reported no concerns and confirmed that council had provided all requested information during reviews. It was a really extensive agenda. It was about 400 pages, and some of the significant issues were discussed was, as mentioned at the previous council meeting, our cyber security strategy. And it was comforting to see that the strategy evaluates our cyber security maturity level and outlines initiatives needed over the next 4 years to enhance that maturity level. It was also really good to meet our newest independent committee member, Lisa Young, providing us with her cyber security experience. And, you know, all organisations going forward really do need that expertise and strategy going forward. The strategic internal audit plan, the committee was presented with this for the next 3 years, and the program is informed by Banyul's Enterprise Risk Register, and it covers things like emergency management, building services, procurement and tendering, capital project management, and follow-up verification of completed action plans. So the committee recommended that council reviews the current program budget to look at the increasing number of audits per year. There was also a tree management audit report, and the committee was presented this, and the standout was that Banyul had a framework and that Banyul's controls were quite strong, or very strong. There were a number of other reports discussed at the meeting that are detailed in the minutes. We also had a very comprehensive presentation from the Director of Corporate Services. I could say it was a fabulous presentation. The financial audit results of all Metro councils and their overall long-term financial sustainability. Really interesting to see how other councils are tracking, and also very reassuring for me as a councillor to see that Banyul tracks very well. Sustainability is becoming an increasing problem for councils. So I also encourage the Banyul community to read the chairperson's biannual committee report, and that really does give you that more comprehensive understanding of the committee's activities over the last 6 months. Thank you.
Would the seconder like to speak?
Mayor, just a question of the appropriate officer, because I was unable to attend the June meeting, but there was just a comment raised in the minutes about the resourcing allocated to the internal audit program for the coming financial year, and the committee seemed to indicate that that needed to be increased, but that wasn't reflected in the recommendation for that item. So just seeking some officer feedback on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Mark Julio, would you like to?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. It certainly was raised by the Audit Committee about extending the budget for the internal audit program, and as Councillor Neely just outlined there's a number of internal audits planned for this year according to that budget. What we will be doing is looking at the 25-26 budget to increase the allocation of funds to expand the audit program to include additional audits. The organisation does get lots of value out of internal audits, so to independently review its processes and systems. So it makes good sense to increase that budget and oversight and review of its processes. So that'll be referred to the 25-26 budget.
Thank you. Further comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, Councillor Neely covered most of the points. The Audit and Risk Committee's functioning well. Good report from the Chair, Professor Stuart Cowles, and the outgoing Chair. We have gone through a process to fill that vacancy and to look at the Audit and Risk Committee, and I believe a report will be coming forward either at a future meeting regarding the future replacement of Professor Cowles. And thank you as well, Director, just for your comments, because I think where observations are raised by the committee around resourcing for audits, we really do need to look seriously at that as a council. Thank you, Mayor.
Further comment? I'll put that. All those in favour? That is carried. We move on to item 3.2, the endorsement of council position on motion to the MAV State Council meeting on the 23rd of August. 23rd of September, isn't it? No. Is it 23rd of August?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
It's August.
Yep, sorry. There are two speakers. First speaker is Melissa Murphy-Webster from Watsonia. Welcome, Melissa. You have 2 minutes speaking in favour of the recommendations.
Good evening, councillors. I just wanted to make reference to a section where the MAV referred to making sure that there was no use of prime agricultural land, which I believe would be for the rural areas as opposed to metro for energy farms. Now, I think it should also be considered, and we should be pushing it, that the inner metro city should be considered as well, especially given the sad loss of the forestry around La Trobe University, where those solar panels could have easily been put over car parks or on top of the buildings. Instead, we lost a lot of trees, and a lot of people have been very unhappy about that. The hypocrisy of trashing nature to protect the environment needs to be kept in check, and Banyule City Council should lead the way in vocalising that. Thank you.
Thank you. I would note that that was in Darebin, not in Banyule. So, Alicia Curry was listed to speak, but she's unwell, so she will not be speaking tonight. I look for a councillor to move a motion. Councillor Neely, seconded Councillor Champion. Comment?
Thank you, Mayor. As in the report, there are 30 motions that Banyule Council has considered carefully, along with the other 78 Victorian councils. And these motions are put forward by Victorian councils. So the motions cover funding deficits that councils are facing, statutory planning, cost shifting, infrastructure needs, particularly for rural councils and growth councils, as well as community wellbeing, like support for women to escape family violence. So just to highlight motion 19, motion 19 is our submission. So my fellow councillors and I are requesting a collective effort to be reinstated so that councils can have support through collective procurement, contract service management. With our waste, councils need a more efficient way to achieve the goals from the Recycling Victoria plan. So with the Waste and Resource Recovery Group being disbanded, councils are not in an empowered position. This motion would attempt to address that. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Champion.
Thanks very much. Firstly, thank you to Councillor Neely for participating in, or being our representative on the MAB. Secondly, having read all the recommendations and responses and justifications by all the councils in Victoria, and they are a selection of metro, rural, regional councils. They all have their own needs and requirements. I'm conscious of just an umbrella. I'm just taking an umbrella view of many of these motions. I'm very conscious that all councils are being imposed with increasing KPIs, if that's the right expression, increasing services, increasing requirements by the state without acknowledging how we will be supported. Mostly economically, but how we will be supported. The other observation I'm making is that councils, local government, are consistently being asked to justify their existence, justify what they choose to do for their communities, why they choose. And this has put pressure on a lot of councils, councillors and our communities, yet there isn't any requirement for our state or federal levels to justify their existence in the same way. And this is what I'm reading is objectionable to many councils. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment? I'll put that. All those in favour? That is carried. We'll move on to item 3.3, the awarding of the contract for the provision of festivals and event services. There are no speakers. Will councillor move a motion? Councillor Garotti, seconded Councillor Di Pasquale. Comment?
Sorry, Mayor, there's an amendment.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll move per that amendment. The council is awarding for $1,230,703.50, excluding GST, for a period of 3 years. and the rest as is.
Thank you. Slight amendment by Councillor Garotti, seconded. Can you agree with that comment?
I don't have any comment.
Any other further comment? Councillor De Pasqua?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So that change there was originally in our documentation was 3 years, so three years plus one, and then for some reason it went to 6 years, just in the notes there. So that's the reason why there's that change there. So with regards to festivals and events for our community, this is one of our major focuses for our community. One of the things we need to be continually aware of is what builds the fabric of our community, bringing all our community members together. We have fantastic festivals, events across the municipality. Most of them are free, very well attended as well. And yeah, this is what makes Banyule, when visitors come to our municipality, whether it be because of family members, friends, and partake in one of our festivals or our events, they often are amazed at how well they're run. We have a very dedicated staff who are continually trying to better our events, trying to be more inclusive for the very young to also the very elderly in our municipality. So this is a very important part of the process where those who are delivering services, infrastructure to our events, they're part of a panel which we will then go to, and they'll be part of this process whenever we do put on an event. So Mayor, just a few comments there just to allow the community to understand how important this item is tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment? I'll put that. All those in favour? That is carried. We'll move on to item 3.4, Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly. There are no speakers. I'm looking for a councillor to move a motion.
I'm happy to move as a non-attendee.
Move Councillor Garotti. Seconded Councillor Neely. Comment?
I think it was a good report, very transparent, and from what I understand, maybe too transparent in some regards, but from what I understand, very productive as well, and perhaps Councillor Neely will touch on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Grotti. We were privileged to hear about what the sector is facing across the country. There are 537 councils across the nation, and many who did gather to listen and meet with federal ministers and vote on 160 motions. You know, much as the MAV meets for Victoria, this was the issues across the country. It was highlighted that councils are really integral to building community trust. Councillors, you know, are most accessible to the community. Residents can contact council or councillors directly, and we do hear firsthand what residents are experiencing. Aside from the guest speakers, the meetings with ministers, visit to federal parliament, we had the opportunity of also driving electric vehicles. We were our own pilots, so that was definitely an interesting experience. It was definitely an education, actually, on EV infrastructure and what's possible, I guess, in a rural setting. So we're also one of the few Victorian councils who embarked on that drive, but glad to have experienced it. Thank you.
Further comment? Councillor Castaldo.
Yeah, as an attendee, you never know what you're going to find up there. Each year, well, the experience this year going up by electric car, identifying the challenges of doing so and the opportunities into the future. The stall holders, the presentations, the opportunities to meet ministers and make sure that they remember us on some of the policies that we're doing here. We had a wonderful advocacy package that we've developed over years. Michelle Pertle, I'll call out to you. You've been very instrumental in developing that. We get to sit with important people up there, and we've got a wonderful package to present to them. And I think with our CEO, the Mayor, Liz and myself, we put our best foot forward to make sure that we could get funding for up to $500,000 on a number of key initiatives we want to drive forward in Banyule. So it's really important that we play an active role. Not every year, we don't need to go up, but advocacy is critical, and that's one of the places we need to do it. Some of the stallholders selling electric vehicles, a couple of years back, there was a couple of stallholders. We brought that technology to Banyule, and we're saving, I think, probably tens of thousands of dollars over the life of those assets, the electric mowers. And there's another collection of very good, useful infrastructure up there that we saw that I will be doing ongoing advocacy informally with officers, as well as making sure that we push forward in all the important areas to save costs for our community. And it was a good event.
Further comment? I'll just say I did attend. I always find it fantastic to go up there. Canberra's a bit cold that time of year, but to listen to some of the world-class speakers we got that talked about trends in population growth, trends in AI, trends in the way people are working was fantastic. Also talked about many of the pressures that we're facing and how the world is changing at a rapid pace. But I think the highlight was getting the second in the for our inclusive employment program, second Australia-wide, and we only just lost that by a couple of votes for our inclusive employment program, which I thought was a real credit to this council and to the staff that have run what is extremely successful. And then also a bit later on to hear that we'd received a $200,000 grant from the federal government to do planning around planning to housing targets and housing strategy around the Bell Street Mall was, I think, well worth going up just to receive that as well. But also I think it's very important that council flies the Banyule flag and makes sure that people are aware the issues that we're facing, and we do speak with a united voice when we go up there, because the MAV represents us quite well. So it is can be quite exhausting going up to Canberra, especially when you're driving an electric car. But I think it's well worth the effort, and yeah, really enjoyed this conference. So I'll put that, all those in favour. That is carried. We'll move on to item 3.5, record of council meetings. There are no speakers. Look for council to move a motion. Moved Councillor Champion, seconded Councillor Neely. Comment? I'll put that, all those in favour. That is carried. And we'll move on to item 3.6, the awarding of the contract for the Anthony Beale Reserve Pavilion development. There is one speaker, Kavan Hill. Welcome, Kavan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm speaking against this motion. I've got some concerns about the logic or lack of logic in the actual recommendation and some of the accuracy of the statements. If you go to page 43, it talks about in section 5, $1.5 million in the current capital works budget for this year, 24-25. But then it goes on and says it want to award a contract for 1.583. We've got a 295,000 shortfall. But then it goes on to say that a preliminary budget or anticipated budget of 1.8 million was actually discussed and agreed within the council. So I'm not quite sure how the timing of this works, but it says that the council advertised for tenders on the 11th of May, extended it to 12th of June, but it knew then that the $300,000 application that it made for a grant to council was not going to be approved, because that was known in May. So this council went ahead to spend in excess of its advertised budget money that relied upon a grant from the government which they knew they weren't going to get. So it's like in my household, if my kids want a table tennis table and I'm short of money, I don't go out and ask the neighbours to borrow the money. I just say, wait until next year. So my question is, why aren't you waiting till next year? This budget submission or budget arrangement is screwed, totally screwed. So I'm not happy about the council going ahead and spending $300,000 that it ostensibly doesn't have. We're short of dough. There's a whole lot of things that could be done. You've got climate emergencies, you've got Aboriginal matters, you've got this, that and the other thing. You've jettisoned all that. You just want to go ahead and spend it on this thing. And I know it's an election year, but all this sort of somehow doesn't have a right smell about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I would say that... Oh, did you want to move? Oh, you got a question? No, you can ask a question. No, if you've got a question, I was going to make a comment. But if you want a question.
Just to the director, just about the timing of the questions from Kevin about the money that was put in the budget.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mayor. There was an allocation in the Capital Works program of, in the 24-25 Capital Works program of the $1.5 million, that's correct. There was an application which was made to Sport and Recreation Victoria for $300,000, and that was made in December 23, and we were advised in May of this year that that grant was not successful.
So just to clarify then, was the council advised of the lack of success of that grant before going out to tender?
We didn't know. We went out for tender prior to when we knew the outcome of that grant. So we released the document for tender before we knew the outcome of that grant.
Thank you. Any further questions? Look for a councillor to move. Moved Councillor Neely, seconded Councillor Garotti. Comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I am quite disappointed that Sport and Rec Victoria, the grant was unsuccessful. I believe that usually council puts in for more than one application and in the hope to at least get one, and it always has in the past. This was very unusual, an unusual situation where council was unsuccessful, as the budget or the state budget has less and less money to give out. So for Anthony Beale, this is an important redevelopment that provides female-friendly change rooms, better accessibility, multi-purpose features, and an overall update of the facility. It desperately needs it. Currently, the office in the building, it's in the middle of the building. It's a dark, more like a cupboard without windows, which is not really workable office space. There will also be an upgrade of better energy efficient products throughout the building. It's a well-used pavilion by Greensborough Junior Football Club. This redevelopment will encourage other clubs to come in and use it as well. And it's also an overflow for cricket in the summer. This process, compared to other tenders, there was 11 contractors submitting their tenders. Best and final offer was sought. The facility really does need this upgrade and will be more inclusive after this redevelopment, making it safer for female participation in sport, lighter and brighter, better environmental outcomes and opportunities for social spaces, which is a really big thing in the north, to encourage those community groups to engage with this space. So moved.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Champion?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm also, while this is a long time coming, I'm also disappointed that the grant was not achieved or accepted. It isn't the first time in the last 2 to 3 years. Our officers have applied to state grants, applied to acquire state grants or be successful in state grants for the Yallambee Pavilion on 2 occasions and have not been successful on both occasions. That pavilion actually requires even more development than this. So this is, look, it's not unusual. I don't expect, I will be obviously supporting this recommendation because there is a need for the pavilion to be upgraded, definitely. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment? Sorry, Councillor Grotti, I should have asked you first.
No, that's okay, Mayor. I was just going to say, look, really appreciate the eagle eye of our Speaker, Kevan Hill, on these matters. But I think it was good to clarify that, tender was released before confirmation of that funding outcome from the state. And this is a typical process because you go out to tender when you have a budget and you don't know what the final outcome from a cost perspective is going to be until those tenders come in. And if they come in over budget, or if they come in over the funding that you ultimately have allocated, because in this case of a lack of the withdrawal, the lack of success with the state government bid, then you make a judgment, a value judgment as a council as to whether you still think it's in the best value of money for the city to proceed. So I think from a process and officer perspective, everything's been done correctly here, and it's upon us as councillors now to say, one, do we approve the tender, and two, do we still think it's best good value for money? And certainly I am happy to approve the tender, and I do think it is a good value for money outcome for the council to proceed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment? I'll put that. All those in favour? That is carried. We move on to item 4.1, draft fair access to sport policy endorsement for community consultation. We have one speaker, Lauren Sanders. I've been practising.
Okay. I'm speaking for this. Encouraging participation in physical activity is something I'm truly passionate about. Women and girls are less likely to participate in club-based sport for a variety of reasons compared to their male counterparts. Anything we can do to encourage equal opportunity and greater choice for women and girls is welcomed. Banyule is in the top 5 most physically active municipalities, and this is full credit to our amazing local sporting clubs. I have been privileged over the years to have worked and been involved in many of these clubs as a trainer and physiotherapist. Our sporting clubs here in Banyule are the heart and soul of the community, providing social connection, a sense of purpose and identity to a wide cross-section of people. This draft policy is great, however, it is neglecting to differentiate between equality and equity. Women and girls should have equal opportunity to access the sport and recreation of their choice. However, it is unrealistic and counterproductive to demand gender equity across sporting codes. Clubs should be providing opportunities to play and train for all their members, not providing 50-50 male to female sort of time slots for training and games if that doesn't reflect the wider playing population ratio. The policy aims to advantage clubs that can achieve gender equity. Would this then mean that netball clubs would be disadvantaged given they typically have higher female participation? Sporting clubs should be given the resources they need regardless of the code, and this policy needs to stipulate if we're for equal access or gender equity, which is often not readily achievable across sporting codes for a multitude of reasons. Kids and adults should be able to choose sport and recreation that sparks joy and is for their individual interests. I'll just follow up with one last point. Council has not applied this policy to aquatic and leisure centres, which is an oversight, I believe, given these large corporations have the capacity to actually implement these draft policies on a broader scale. Watermark is currently run by Belgravia Leisure, who recently sought to remove childcare access on the on-site creche from a membership inclusion, forcing mostly mothers to pay $10 to $15 a session in addition to their membership to access their services. Council should not look the other way.
Can you sum up, please?
Yep, when women, particularly mothers, are being disadvantaged in a council-owned facility. We can't expect our grassroots local sporting clubs to implement these policies, but not demand the same from big corporates leasing multi-million-dollar council facilities.
So you'll be making a submission to this draft policy?
I should be.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
We would
Thank you,
encourage it.
councillors.
Thank you very much. and look for a councillor to move. Move Councillor Garotti, seconded Councillor Neely. Comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Happy for this policy to be going out. Good feedback raised by the Speaker. I would certainly encourage the Speaker to lodge a formal submission, but I think Director Tobacco feedback to be taken on board, you know, in particularly that equality versus equity lens, just to make sure, ensuring that there's no unintended consequences from the policy. Just one observation I raised was the importance of equality of access for people with disabilities, and just a question that I'd posed to the officers, whether this policy could be strengthened in that regard. And I know that the feedback's been taken on board, and I certainly look forward to seeing how that plays out in the final version that comes to Council. But otherwise, very pleased to be supporting this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm also pleased to support this. I do look forward to hearing what the community has to say on this, enhancing inclusive practices and whether they can identify any further barriers, and I think Councillor Garotti has identified one. Sports clubs have emphasised the importance of improving their knowledge and capacity to support inclusion, which is really wonderful to hear. The fair access objectives do benefit everybody. I just wanted to highlight that. You know, a safe and welcoming space benefits everybody. Eliminating gender inequality is good. Building understanding and inclusion is good. These are things that we want to see across our municipality. The actions in the plan really do encourage this. Thank you, Mayor.
Are there any further comments? Councillor Champion.
Thanks, Mayor. I wasn't actually going to comment, but I did have a conversation around 4 o'clock this afternoon with a client of mine. And a comment that she made was, gee, the girls are doing well in Olympics this time round, aren't they? Our girls are doing great. They've got heaps of medals. They're fantastic. And I agreed, obviously. And then she said, but I wonder how the men are going and what they're thinking and how they're feeling about that, because they're not getting quite as many medals as the girls. So we've got this gender gap argument again. This is where it all starts. It starts with a policy within local government. It starts with our sporting clubs at, you know, the 4 and 5 year old levels. It all starts there. So I would actually, I do support definitely point number 3, the gender equitable access. One of the comments I made in our conversation this afternoon was, and then we have the discrepancy about the boxer who was declared not a woman, even though she was boxing in the women's field for whatever reason. So we are really, we really need to consider there are more than 2 genders. And as chair of the LGBTIQA+ committee, there are more than 2 genders. So I certainly endorse this sporting policy endorse the community consultation, and I ask all of us to please contribute. We would love to hear all your feedback. There are more than 2 genders who play sport. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment, Councillor Di Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so one of the things that needs to be looked at is this is a framework that has been that we're floating to our community on behalf of the state government. So the state government basically has the community sports infrastructure funding pool, which if a council doesn't follow these guidelines, they're not going to get that funding pretty much. So it's a bit of a fine line, because if as a community we don't follow those guidelines, well, then we're not going to get as much funding. And there was an item just before, Mayor, where there was funding for a sports pavilion, but we weren't actually successful. And across the board, state and federal funding has been decreasing. So they're putting encumbrances on our community more and more, and decreasing funding further and further. Where the fine line is that most of our clubs' facilities groups, etc., are run by volunteers. If there are higher and higher barriers for volunteers to participate in our clubs, if it becomes too time tedious, if it becomes too education tedious, if it becomes too much of a barrier for our volunteers to volunteer at the clubs, we're going to have less participation because it will filter down to the clubs functioning correctly. So there's a fine line there that we need to make sure that our officers are continually communicating to the state government about, and communicating to us as the councillors and also the community as well. With regards to the participation, with regards to our speaker, the childcare at Watermark, there is a customer request that we are waiting to hear feedback on that. It's a difficult one because Belgravia are a company who are running the facility and returning a monetary benefit to the community. Before we had organisations like Belgravia in our facilities, we would run them ourselves, and therefore, I won't say councils that do that make a loss all the time, but most of the time they're subsidised. So it's a fine line we need to be running with regards to that, but we'll be getting more information back on that shortly. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Castaldo.
Yeah, look, I've got a unique experience. I've got two children, a boy and a girl, and we're at a footy club and she's playing and she's only got one other girl there, and if that girl doesn't turn up, she's on her own, but there's about 20 boys. The thing is, I don't want her to miss out on opportunities that my son has, and I grew up in a time when girls watched and boys played a lot of sports. We've got to change that. We're not there yet. We've got some way to go. I'm really grateful that we've got this report coming to us to try and keep doing the work we need to do to give the girls the opportunity that I had, and I know my boy's going to have, but it's not quite even yet. I don't know whether girls want to do something different, but I think we've got to keep working to give every girl the opportunity that I think boys have had the opportunity for a long time. So I'm very supportive of this. Keen to see if we, or you had some suggestions then, if we've missed anything. We don't want to miss anything. Please put your suggestions forward if you have other areas that we need to make sure that female participation or people of any gender are missing out on. We don't want those barriers. All people with disability. It's really important work, and I, for one, am all for this inclusion. And there are challenges to make sure those volunteers are across this subject matter too. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but I think we've got to work collectively as a community to overcome issues of the past.
Thank you. Further comment? I'll put that, all those... Oh, sorry, Councillor McKern, did you want to speak?
Thank you to the speaker who raised some really salient points. I might just say, as a female myself who plays sport and has always played sport, I've always felt that the opportunities are there. It's actually encouraging girls to be involved. That seems to be more of a challenge. We are currently undertaking implementation of female change rooms, the designs at West Ivanhoe Sporting Club, and those female change rooms should be constructed over the next couple of years. The new pavilions that will be constructed hopefully at Chelsworth Park will accommodate female change rooms. I was actually speaking to one of the girls who used to play in the girls' footy team there at Ivanhoe, asking her whether it was actually the absence of dedicated female change rooms that stopped her playing football because she no longer plays. And she said no, had nothing to do with it. We didn't really care where we got changed. Why many of us stopped was, well, it was COVID that was that presented a barrier, but post-COVID, many of the girls didn't come back to it, and they didn't come back to it because they didn't want to play. So once you get a core number that no longer want to play, then their friends don't want to play. It alludes to Councillor Castaldo's points. I think people look for friendship, they look for connections in sport. I know I do, and so do many others. And if those connections aren't there, they may not be that willing to continue participating. So it's how we engage diverse groups that I think is equally as important as opportunities, because I do see opportunities being provided, but it's just that technique, I suppose, or method of engagement that we perhaps need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. I'll put that. All those in favour? That is carried. We'll move on to item 4.2, McLeod Tennis Club unscheduled repair works. There are 3 speakers to this item. The first will be a written statement read out by Mark Julio, Director of Corporate Services for John Gildas, and he's speaking for the recommendations. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor. The McLeod Tennis Club has been growing steadily over recent years with significant member growth, increased competition participation and a broadening involvement in local community activities. As it has grown, demand for court use has also increased, and losing one of the courts has had a huge impact on the club. With many of the remaining 5 courts fully utilised at peak times, many players are unable to play and have to go to other clubs in the area. Some social competition evening matches have had to finish as late as 11 p.m, and the club has now had to resort to hiring courts from other clubs so that the junior and social teams can still all participate as they have in the past. This is costing the club over $200 a week, eroding the savings the club was hoping to use for rejuvenation of its ageing facilities. Given Court 1 is the closest to McLeod Village, the highly visible from neighbouring shops and playground, it's such a shame to see the court dishevelled and unused. A return to seeing kids playing together and having fun on a court would improve the aesthetic and feel of the surrounding area considerably and alleviate the significant burden that is being felt by the club and its members by having the court out of commission.
Thank you. We have a second speaker, who is Karen Jidbis, I believe, and her statement will be read by Natasha Swan. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Dear councillors, we're a team of 4 female tennis players who've been members of the McLeod Tennis Club for the past 2 years. 4 of us started out joining a weekly coaching class, and after 6 months formed a team together to play Wednesday night ladies competitions, with the remaining 2 ladies joining later. We've all become great friends and we absolutely love our tennis, both on Monday nights for our lesson and Wednesday nights for competition. Since Court 1 closed around 9 months ago, we've been impacted in several ways. For the past couple of competition seasons, our Wednesday ladies team have been limited to only 1 to 1.5 courts for the night. This often means a late finish for all teams playing at McLeod, as late as 11 p.m. This is a shame for so many reasons. One of the traditions we've lost since Court 1's closure has been the post-match supper. With less courts available and the late finishes, both home and away teams are now reluctant to stay behind after matches finish to socialise, which is an important part of our tennis. For many, it's an opportunity to mix with others and make new connections. Another negative ramification of having less courts for Wednesday night competition is the increased risk of injury to players. As a result of not being able to play one set after another, players are forced to have long breaks between their 3 sets. This often means players stop moving and cool down in between sets, increasing the chance of muscle injuries when recommencing play. Many of our opponent away teams have expressed their frustration in only having 1 to 1.5 courts for the night. McLeod is one of the only clubs at which competition teams don't have access to 2 courts, so they can wrap up their matches at a decent time.
Thank you. We have one further speaker, Kaban Hill from Banyule Rate Players Action Group, and he's speaking against this recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not aware of a cash box, a secret cash box that this council has got that can afford all these sorts of things. The last comment I got up and talked about was 100,000, 200,000 overrun on another project. Now we're wanting 100,000 unbudgeted for. Now my heart goes out to these poor tennis players, okay, but I've got solutions for you. Instead of thinking about giving 100,000 for this just before an election, I might mention, Mayor, in your ward, why don't you just give them $10,000, which would cover the cost of hiring a court, and save 90 until you've got a better balance sheet? Point 1. Point 2, why don't you dig the trees out? I'll leave that hang. You know what? In here it talks about, oh, well, we don't know yet how many other tennis courts in Banyule might have the same problem. Open-ended. Pour the money out. Go for it. Have a lovely election. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Are there any questions from yes, Councillor Di Pasquale?
Mayor, I do have a question for the appropriate officer. In the past, we have, and I believe it was from memory probably 8 odd years ago, we did a tennis audit for courts, lighting, etc. Where is that at, and is that being reviewed, or what's the plan to review that?
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. So Council is currently preparing itself for the development and preparation of a new tennis strategy. As a part of the preparation of that strategy, there will be an audit of our tennis facilities and what some of the capital requirements and maintenance regimes might be moving forward. So we'll be gathering that data over the next 12 months.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Fiona?
Yeah, sorry, I just have a question for the appropriate officer. What's the likelihood, soon as we're talking about tree roots, that the tree root barrier will not stop the damage? So once the resurfacing's done, if it's done, that it will continue and then we'll end up spending more money in the future?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The advice that we've received through the quotation process has made it clear that there needs to be further investigations, which mean that the synthetic surface must be peeled back in order to evaluate the likelihood and the likely success of any tree root barriers. So the exploratory works, assuming that the recommendation before Council tonight is adopted, would put Council in a much clearer position with those exploratory works being able to be completed, and therefore determining whether or not tree barriers are required.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor McKern?
Through you, Mayor, I might ask, or actually forward a question from, it would appear, the Committee of Management there at McLeod Tennis Club, who sent through an email with a few queries this afternoon. So through you, if I could ask the appropriate director, these are the questions that have been posed. Given that the unplayability of the court was reported to Council in October last year, why has it taken this long for it to be addressed and reach its current point?
Through you, Mayor. I can only speak for the knowledge and the information that I have available. I'm reasonably new to the role, but what I can confirm is that there are more than 160 leases and licences that operate across all of Council's facilities in this municipality. Under each of those individual leases, there are different clauses for maintenance provisions and the responsibilities of councils, the responsibilities of tenancies. We take all of those responsibilities very seriously as officers. We conduct exploratory investigations to understand the nature of the complaints. They're triaged, they're worked through. In this particular instance, there was a requirement for a quotation to be procured for some expert advice. Obviously, the preparation of Council's budgeting process did not align with the information that was required and necessary at that particular point. So the officer recommendation in the report tonight effectively puts forward a much more thorough estimate of what the costs might be for the reparation works, and in the context of that information being as clear as it can be, rather than a large unknown sum being prepared and presented through a budget process where the information wasn't available.
Thank you very much for the reply. Whilst there are a number of questions, there's probably just one more I would ask through you, Mayor. The club state that they have had to hire external courts for the intervening period to accommodate their night tennis and junior teams, and that's run at a cost. They are wondering what compensation might be available to make up for this financial impact on the club.
Through you, Mayor, it's probably important to note that what Council does in terms of providing access to its facilities to community-based organisation, that is at a significantly reduced rental rate. So in this particular case, I believe the leasing fee is around about $1,500 per annum. If that was a commercial lease, I would expect that to be upwards of $25,000 to $30,000. So the provisions that Council provides in terms of a lower rental and also including inside the actual lease agreement itself provisions of indemnity against council for any damages incurred by any of the clubs or the tenancies associated with those properties. So the answer to that question would be that there wouldn't be any sort of recourse available to the club at this particular point in time in terms of any damages that may or may not have been incurred.
Thank you. Further comments? I'll look for a councillor to move a motion. Move Councillor Grotti. I'll second it, being my ward. Comment?
I'll hand over to you.
Well, I'll say a few things. I do have regular contact with McLeod Tennis Club, and I know they submitted a master plan recently which talked about a new pavilion and an additional courts, but they've never raised this issue with me before, and the first I knew about this was in this report come to council. So to suggest this is some sort of electioneering, I think is totally wrong, and I think it's disgusting that people would make such an inference. But I will support this tonight because it is a very well-used, very popular tennis club that provides a fantastic service in Banyule for the provision of tennis, and they're actually expanding. They want to add additional courts, and they've gone to the trouble and the expense at their own expense to draw up a plan to how they could increase the number of courts and also where they could place a new pavilion if that was. So they are very forward-thinking, very well run and very well attended club, and I'll support this tonight. So I'll put that to all those in favour. That is carried. We've already done item 6.1. We'll move on to item 8, or item 9, sorry, notice of motion, Bundoora Square. We have 3 speakers. The first speaker is Brian Grace from Good Governance Banyule, and he's speaking against this item. Thank you, Brian.
There you go. I'm personal for myself today. My name is Brian Grace. I'm a resident of Greensborough and have been for over 44 years. I'm also now president of Good Governance Banyule, and I speak on behalf of Good Governance Banyule, and I say that this agenda item, there's people I have spoken to, and not just the members of Good Governance Banyule, but local residents, are absolutely appalled that this council is thinking of giving money to another community or another local government, being, I think, Whittlesea, to improve benefits for Banyule citizens. Why would we spend ratepayers' money in other municipalities? And that's a question that needs to be answered by this council. Now, I can't answer it because there was no public debate on this question. There was no discussion. It just appeared in the agenda on Wednesday. So the community has only had a few days to think about it, and these are the questions that are coming up. Why would you spend ratepayers' money going to another council? It's unheard of. And I can tell you now, the residents will be in uproar if this is approved. This is a bad idea. Why not use our current Banyule resources, such as the library at Watsonia and the neighbourhood watch house at Watsonia? If the people of Bundoora, they wouldn't have to travel far to go to what are already under-resourced facilities in Watsonia. We want our ratepayers' money to be spent in Banyule. No one in Banyule wants our money spent in another municipality. And that's a clear question that this council has to get through. No money is to be spent in another community. It's in Banyule or not at all. We understand the reasons for the idea, but I say Banyule residents also shop at Northland, which has a car park which has more cars stolen in it than any other municipality in Melbourne, in Australia. More cars are stolen at Northland than anywhere else. Do we put security guards at Northland? No, we don't. Thank you. I'd also like to say thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Brian. Our second speaker is Judy Edwards from McLeod, and she's also speaking against the recommendation. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you. I won't take very long, certainly not 5 minutes like someone. Why is council giving monies from that Banyule constituents pay in their rates to another council? That's just shocking. Our rate should be going towards Banyule facilities. Why do you not encourage people to go to Watsonia Library, which is very close? It's a fantastic library. It's not the biggest we have, but it is a really good library. And at the moment, it's probably the only one we have until the other one gets built. Watsonia Neighbourhood House is also an excellent facility, which is in a perfect position for all constituents, including those over on the other side of Plenty Road, that they can come over and use that facility. Banyule and Whittlesea is very accessible, that community centre. Both of these facilities would actually benefit from extra resources to cater for extra services to the community. We could also offer, if it was needed, a bus service maybe from over that side to come over and bring people to the library or to the neighbourhood house if they wanted to get there. If there is a need to have these type of facilities in the area outside of Banyule, of Bundoora and Mill Park, then Whittlesea Council must do that, not Banyule. Our monies must be used in Banyule for Banyule ratepayers and citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more speaker, Melissa Murphy-Webster from Watsonia, who is going to speak for the recommendations.
Actually, my finger slipped and I'm not speaking for, I'm speaking against. I don't understand the same. I echo the sentiments there, why we would invest money outside of Banyule at this point in time when we've got areas such as the Heidelberg Mall that need work, and we do have some brilliant libraries of our own for the residents to use. I have been wondering why Watsonia and Ivanhoe Streetscapes have got precedent over more deserving areas, and therefore spending money outside the area, to me, when we've got little in the budget to wiggle with, is not ideal. I do want to say that in the event that it did proceed, or was something to consider, would there be actually any effort to see if the corporations there would actually put any skin in the game? Coles and Woolworths would once again benefit more than any other business in that area. And we've already seen that Woolworths has benefited really well from Banyule already. So, as I said, I'm against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. For our final speaker, there is a councillor report. I look for someone to move the...
I have a question, Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Peter.
So either to yourself, Mayor, or to the appropriate officer, in this circumstance where we're looking at getting information or investigating a possible solution in a different council, what would be the most appropriate way that wouldn't require, in this scenario, potentially resources from council being delivered here?
I could respond. We could request Whittlesea to do the investigation, and I imagine they will do that, be part of that investigation as well. But whether they'll do the entire part of the investigation or part of it, I'm not sure, but I imagine we would ask Whittlesea to do the majority of the work in this instance.
Also, just to further, is that not what MAV and the Northern Alliance would be used for, out of curiosity?
No.
No?
No, MAV in particular look at more bigger picture issues, not smaller council-related infrastructure like this, and also the Northern Council Alliance is more focused on the regional impacts, and I don't consider this to be a regional impact. Any further questions? Councillor McKern.
Through you, Mayor, I would like to pose a question to the appropriate officer. How much is council, just as a reminder, how much is council spending on design and build of the Watsonia Town Square, which, if I get my calculations right, is probably about 1.5 kilometres away from Bundoora Square as the crow flies?
through you, Mayor, I would have to take that question on notice to give an accurate answer for the budget for that project.
Thank you. Further questions? I'll look for someone to move the motion. Moved.
I've actually got a question, Mayor, because I have raised it as a notice of motion, but I have picked up feedback from the gallery and the community, and I don't want there to be a perception there in the community that I in any way support a misallocation of resource. Is there any opportunity for me to abandon the notice of motion?
If no one moves it and no one seconds it, then it will be abandoned. Look for a count.
Sorry, just quickly to the notice of motion. Would it not be better to have it as a notice of motion, because this is a formal way of raising your concerns, Councillor Grotti, but changing the wording to writing a letter from the Mayor to request Whittlesea City to investigate it at their expense, if that's the case? Because it's still, we're talking about borders by a road, but yes, as much as I agree with the sentiment of resource use, you're right. Your residents do go to Bundoora, so it's not something that should be just abandoned, in my opinion.
Oh, Councillor Grotti has the option to withdraw the notice of motion.
Yeah, look, at this stage, I'd like to withdraw the notice of motion.
Oh, I'll ask the governance team, is that okay? But the notice of motion has been withdrawn. We'll move on to general items of business. So, are there any general items of business? I know Councillor Champion has several. Thank you.
Busy fortnight, Mayor. I am never parking my car in Northland Shopping Centre. Okay, we have had a very busy fortnight in Banyule, so I'm acknowledging 3 events that I attended. So I was joined, the Inclusive Employment Program. So I was joined by our Mayor, Councillor Tom Melican, and Beale Ward Councillor Elizabeth Neely last week, along with our officers, in celebrating this year's cohort of participants' successful completion of Banyule's 6th Inclusive Employment Program. The evening is dedicated to recognising the participants' hard work, dedication and the incredible progress they have made over the last 6 months. They've gained new skills, they've built confidence, created lasting networks, all while contributing to our community through their roles within council. And one thing I did notice with this particular cohort, they actually contributed through their own initiative to each of their departments they were working in, which was brilliant. So it is important to note there is stringent criteria to be met in order to be accepted into this specialist program, and the details can be obtained from Banyule's website or contacting your local ward councillor to connect with the appropriate officers for information. And disappointing we didn't quite get the gong for that particular program, but there's always next year. Youth Summit report card. So last week, the outcomes of the Youth Summit, which was held in May 2023, were reported to councillors and officers. The themes created by a selection of senior Banyule secondary students led to a vision of an inclusive, safe and respected community. An introduced theme from this cohort is masculinity, while the theme of body image remains consistent every Youth Summit and was a key issue when I was a teenager in the 1980s, so some things don't change. Council Youth Team consistently works very closely with our young people to bring this vision to a reality, and we're all on the journey with this particular vision. I was joined by the Mayor at this particular event, along with Councillor Peter. I think you joined me too. Councillor Peter Castaldo was there. Last Saturday, the Eltham Dandenong Junior Basketball Association Girls Showcase Round was held at La Trobe University. The CEO, Alison Beckwith, and I were invited by the President of Banyule Hawks and the Vice President of the Ivanhoe Knights basketball clubs to attend this round, and we learnt some interesting statistics. We watched some junior girls play basketball, and we heard of a vision for significantly more female players in our local basketball clubs, as well as more women in leadership roles. So currently around 30% of leadership roles in the Eltham Dandenong Junior Basketball Association are held by women, And there's only one woman out of 11 members sitting on the EDJBA committee. So the showcase round highlights and encourages increased female participation, not only in basketball, but all community sports and leadership roles. The intention is to equalise the gender balance, which leads to a greater diversity of identity and ideas. I'm going to actually ad-lib here. As chair of the LGBTIQA+ committee, I would add that inclusion of all genders in all sports at all levels can actually lead to increased club members and an even greater diversity in leadership, allowing for a healthier and welcoming environment for all residents and sport lovers. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Further general items of business? Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 4 items, so I'll put my skates on to deliver and hopefully present something coherent. Firstly, Vale Jana Romano. Our condolences are extended to the family and friends of Jana Romano, who sadly passed away recently. Jana was a terrific contributor and much admired member of the Warringal Conservation Society. She will be sorely missed. Second, the Chelsworth Community Meeting. Thank you to the 40 local residents, as well as Council's CEO and Mayor Councillor Tom Melican, who attended our recent Chelsworth Community Meeting. We had community representation from at least 4 wards, which shows the importance of meeting with residents on matters important to them. My hope is that these meetings will continue into the new term of council and that they are of real value, as expressed by attendance numbers shows, providing much wanted opportunities for our residents to meet councillors and senior staff face to face. 3, to celebrate National Tree Day, and we might have a poster put up on the screen. There will be a community planting day held at Seddon Reserve on Sunday the 25th of August from 2 to 3:30 p.m. This is an initiative I'm proud to have championed and am delighted that staff will be present, as will myself, and hoping to have as many of our community present to do some planting at Seddon Reserve. And lastly, St Bernadette's Primary School observed Thin Green Line Day last week. This is a global not-for-profit foundation that recognises the efforts of park rangers around the world to protect our parks and reserves. Mayor Councillor Melican and I, together with Park Ranger Peter G from Darebin Parklands, were pleased to attend. And it'll be something of interest to know that the founder of Thin Green Line Foundation is Sean Wilmore, a former student of St Bernadette's. To know more about him, you can Google him. The ABC did a story on his efforts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further items? I'll just mention the Clyde James Smith Award, which was presented last Friday at Watermark, or the council building. For those that are unaware, that's a award that's given to the most deserving police member every year. It has been in hiatus since COVID, but we reinitiated it this year. Clyde James Smith was a policeman in 1935 and was shot in Frankston. He was a resident of Banyule. He died from his injuries. He was 33 years old. At the time, he had 5 young children. His wife, his widow, raised those children. 3 of those children became police officers and on average served 35 years each in the police force, so those 3 children served over 100 years of police force. So the winner of the Clive James Smith Award was Robin Waite, who has over 40 years experience in the police force, the vast majority of those at Heidelberg, and it was quite touching to see the way her fellow officers spoke about her and the way her family talked about her and her dedication not only to the residents of Banyule but to the police force, but also to Heidelberg Station, because she's had several offers to move on and she's refused those offers because she loves working at Heidelberg so much. So it was a lovely occasion, and I congratulate Robin on her many years of service to the police force but also the Banyule community. Are there any other items of oh, sorry, Liz, did you have a general one?
That's right. I'll just got a quick one. I met with the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, our last meeting for this term of council. It's been a bit of a hard slog for committees as we began meeting during COVID online, and then we moved to hybrid meetings after a time, and then we moved to in-person meetings, and then we moved the meetings from Ivanhoe to Greensborough just to make it easier for all the participants. The participants worked really hard across the over 3 years, I believe. I've been on this committee, and their dedication, I just wanted to acknowledge their dedication and commitment to our arts and culture program. A really robust discussion over many achievements across council. Just to mention a few, we had working groups, and a lot of the committee members got involved, on a specific project. We did the art collection policy review, grants assessments, touring Ivanhoe Library for all of its cultural and art aspects, and many events that were there, acknowledging not just our community infrastructure but also private infrastructure like Empire Studios. We need to work in partnership with others to ensure that we're maximising all the spaces across Banyule. Also, there were creative Banyule workshops, consultations on council frameworks, a very popular public art policy review. We know that COVID brought out a lot of interest from our community that were walking through spaces, that the need for more public art. So, that's something that's come to the forefront of the committee. And also our festivals and events framework, which, I mentioned earlier tonight. Our festivals and events are really well attended and treasured by our community. So just thank you to the committee for all of their investment. Just some feedback was that they not only wanted to have an advisory consultative role, they were happy to be really hands-on. So there's just feedback to take on for future committees that, they were there not just to advise but to get involved.
Thank you. We'll move on to public question times. The first question is Peter Bendix. Welcome, Peter. Yep. Have you got a copy of your question, or do you know it off? Okay. Do you want to turn the speaker on, please? The microphone. Thank you.
I'll raise this especially and put it into light of given earlier conversations regarding agenda items 3.6 and 4.1 today. All parents want to see strong involvement of their children in community sport, but in recent years we've seen the surface at Elder Street Reserve fall way behind that of other ovals and grounds inside Banyule, especially compared to Australian rules football grounds. This has now reached a point where it's now impacting the enjoyment and participation of children. So can the council please advise what scheduled maintenance works for Elder Street Reserve, both during the season and for larger repairs, which are required to keep the field safe and fit for purpose for competitive sport are planned, knowing that nothing has been done in a number of years to even deal with the fact that the surface is massively uneven and has potholes in it.
Thank you, Peter. There is a response going to be read by Darren Bennett. Thank you, Darren.
Yes, the current standard for elder reserves is influenced by several conditions and usage factors, including poor natural subsurface soil conditions, high usage rates and recent poor weather, which has impacted surface conditions and council's ability to access the site for planned maintenance. Ongoing weekly surface inspections provide condition reports that guide our maintenance and programs. Council's maintenance regime is adjusted across the year for seasonal conditions. Key activities include fertilising and aeration pre-winter, from autumn to spring, mowing and rolling twice a week when we can get on it, fertilising with granular and liquid fertiliser, spraying for weeds and disease, and conducting renovations, which include top dressing. And in winter, weekly mowing and rolling when the conditions permit. In recent weeks, our teams haven't been able to access the sports fields, many sports fields across Banyule, due to...
Excuse me, Peter. Can you let him finish?
Due to the surfaces being too wet. with potential to cause damage. Because of this, Elder Street hasn't been mowed or rolled for the past 2 weeks. With recent dry weather and kind forecasts ahead, our teams plan to resume mowing and rolling this week. Surface aeration will be completed if possible. In addition to that, turf renovation at Elder Street is scheduled for late spring to summer and includes scarifying the turf to remove thatch and improve drainage and top dressing with sand. Remedial works to address isolated areas needing improving, including replacing and levelling sections of turf.
Thank you. That will be included in the minutes, your question and the response, Peter. We move on to item 2, Damien Martin from Montmorency. Is Damien here? Welcome, Damien.
Good evening, everyone. Given the ongoing concerns from residents about the health, safety and environmental impacts of the unsealed roads in our municipality, we have been writing to Council seeking a policy change that includes, but not limited to, contributing to the cost of sealing the roads and taking responsibility for the costs of associated construction of required drainage assets, distributing the remaining contribution from the ratepayers evenly, regardless of frontage or property size, exploring payment options such as payment plans over several years added to rates, ensuring that the roads are sealed at the lowest possible cost with simplicity in engineering. As the role of council is to determine policy, what steps can council take to work unanimously towards a policy change that supports these measures, ensuring a coordinated and collaborative effort with the community to improve our local infrastructure?
Thank you, Damien. There is a response which will be also read by Darren Bennett. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Banyule is approximately 5.3 kilometres of unsealed road across the municipality, which are generally low traffic roads and most do not have any through traffic. The roads are maintained to appropriate standards for low volume unsealed roads, including inspection after significant rain events or on request from residents. Council does not currently have a formal policy for the construction of unsealed roads. However, based on previous council resolution, construction of these roads have traditionally been considered for a special charge scheme where abutting property owners who derive a special benefit as expressed in the Local Government Act 1989 are required to contribute to the full cost of its construction. Officers propose to develop a formal special charge scheme policy to apply to the construction of a range of infrastructure assets, including roads, laneways and drainage. The policy will likely consider a range of matters, including scheme initiation requirements, minimum support thresholds, consultation processes, apportionment methodology, treatment for special cases, construction standards, as well as payment options. Subject to council endorsement, it's anticipated a draft policy will be released for community consultation February of March 2025, with policy adoption after that time.
Thank you, Damien. It's something this council is certainly fully aware of and looking at very seriously. Our third question is Lucas Moore. Welcome again, Lucas.
Thanks, Mayor. Given the discussion on housing tonight, this question seemed pertinent. With many renters and mortgage holders being squeezed by the growing cost of living crisis, Council needs to be doing more, in my view, to support those struggling to keep a roof over their heads. For example, by advocating to the state government that a cap in rent rises be introduced so that the cost of living is lessened and the increase of land taxes and rates.
Lucas.
Yep.
That's not the question that we have on the papers.
I've switched it around a little bit. It's the same text.
Well, looks a bit different to me, but...
so that increased land taxes and rates are not continually passed on to tenants. My rent, for example, has gone up over 20% over the past 2 years, and there are many others my age who have had the same experience. Council also needs to be taking action to dissuade the land banking of properties as investments. A recent report produced by Prosper Australia and published in The Age estimates that over 5% of dwellings in Banyule are unoccupied. This issue is particularly bad in 3081, where affordable homes are needed most, but vacancy is over 8%. Housing should be a human right, not something used for financial gain to the exclusion of those in need. As rents go up, many people in Banyule are facing eviction, leading to a growing homeless population. As Council knows, between 2016 and 2021, the homeless population grew in Banyule by 40%. I'm sure in the last few years it has grown even more. Meanwhile, there are thousands of perfectly good homes sitting empty across Banyule. What actions are Council prepared to take to cut down on houses in Banyule being deliberately left vacant for financial speculation? For example, by introducing increased rates for properties left vacant for more than 12 months.
Thank you. Councillor officers, the response is Mark Gilio. Would you mind?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Currently, Council's revenue rating plan differentiates between improved and vacant land only. There's no differential rate between occupied and unoccupied land. The merits of this change, to answer the Speaker's question, to the structure would need to be included in Council's next revision of the revenue rating plan, 25 to 29, so next year. Having said that, the ministerial guidelines for differential rating, where this might apply, which was published in 2013, do urge caution in applying differential rates to very few property assessments, as would be the case with an unoccupied rate differential. And it reads, the use of differential rate applicable to very few property assessments in a municipality should be considered with caution, particularly in relation to setting of higher differential rates, and have regard to the impact of the land subject to the proposed rate and the consequential impact of the broader municipality to the consideration of equity. This is especially so in the case of differential rates applied to narrowly and specifically defined activities for land use types.
Thank you. Our next question was from Michelle Giles, but she's unwell, so her question and response will be in the minutes. And next question was from Wendy Pallister. I know Wendy's still here. Welcome again, Wendy.
I'd like to ask my question, but given the seriousness of the council letter to me earlier this year, not to speak about James Reserve, I'd like to ask if I can ask my question about James Reserve. Okay. So, what was the budget or the cost of the irrigation system installed on James Reserve, given that it was substantial, deep trench, almost like farming irrigation? I'd like to know the budget or the costings.
Darren, would you like to respond to that question, please?
Yes, 150,000 was allocated in the 23-24 budget for design and construction of James Reserve Irrigation Renewal Project. Following receipt of the quotations for construction of the works, additional project funding was required. The final project cost was 233,000.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is Christina Murray from Welcome.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors and members of the gallery. Transparency is important to residents of Banyule. Oh, sorry. The mayoral ball occurred on Saturday the 20th of July this year. We understand the reason, the objective and the purpose of having a mayoral ball. But we would like to know the total expenditure of the ball, the donations that were given to charities and how much was given to each. Thank you.
Thank you. The response will be read by the CEO.
Thanks, Mayor. Council held its community ball on Saturday the 20th of July at the Centre Ivanhoe. The event was attended by 285 community guests, and the total cost for the event was $43,685,000, excluding GST. The amount that was raised for the Banyule Community Fund via the raffle on the night was $1,765, and that will benefit a number of groups as it's donated to that charity.
Thank you. We move on to question 7. Kavan Hill. Welcome, Kavan. You're back.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad you're still talking to me.
No, I'm not.
As background information, the Council provides generous financial and in-kind support to local traders associations, and ratepayers are concerned that this ongoing support is meeting the intended objectives of Council. So my question is, can Council indicate if it is satisfied with the economic and social returns to the Banyule community from its financial support provided to the traders associations over the past 8 years, and particularly in the year 23-24? Thank you.
Natasha Swan, would you like to respond on behalf of Council? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Council does see great value in the structured programs and support that has facilitated growth, revitalisation, strategic marketing and management of its 11 key retail centres through its special rate and charge schemes and associated council funding support. Council did resolve at its meeting on the 5th of September 2022 to undertake a number of reforms as part of a 2.5-year pilot to the arrangements regarding how we oversee and help deliver the financial support provided to the 11 trader associations who benefit from a special rate and charge scheme in their centres. Council officers are currently working through the learnings from this pilot at this point in the process. Regard will certainly be given as to whether the schemes continue to provide the value previously identified as part of this review.
Thank you. Our next question is Pippa Griffiths, who's still in the gallery. Welcome, Pippa.
The planning panel for the Heidelberg Structure Plan Planning Amendment C172 recently concluded, and the panel will be reporting to Council soon. So can Council please describe what happens, including any impacts of the caretaker period following the receipt of that report?
Thank you, Pippa. Natasha, would you like to respond, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The planning panel for Amendment C172 has 40 business days to provide its report to Council. Council must then in turn make a decision to abandon or adopt the amendment with or without changes within 40 business days of receiving the panel report. If adopted, Council will submit the amendment to the Minister for Planning within 10 business days of the date that amendment was adopted, and the Minister for Planning in turn must make a final decision within 40 business days. Once that decision is provided, the final step is gazettal of the changes into the Banyule planning scheme, for which there's no timeframe specified. If dates fall within the caretaker period for our steps, we will certainly seek an extension of time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lauren Sanders. Welcome again, Lauren.
Thank you. I will just provide some background to my question. If you were to ask any woman with young kids where she spends the majority of her week, it would be at the local park or playground. It is fantastic across Banyule. We have a multitude of pocket parks and neighbourhood playgrounds. According to the Open Spaces Plan, people often spend 1 to 2 hours at these parks. I can guarantee you that if sufficient shade were provided over these playgrounds in our smaller playgrounds around Banyule, parents and children would spend a much longer time there. I'll provide the example of Diamond Village Playground. Brings people from all around town to utilise the fantastic traffic park. However, the playground itself in summer months is effectively rendered useless in the glaring sun. Local playgrounds play a vital role in building gross motor skills, problem solving, social connection.
Excuse me, can you ask the question, please?
I'm getting there. Given many mothers attend playgrounds with newborn babies and younger siblings who cannot wear sunscreen in these outdoor spaces, given the Council's commitment to fair access to sport and recreation for women and girls, will Banyule City Council commit to implementing shade sales at regional and neighbourhood parks, making play spaces more accessible for all people in the community all year long? Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 directors who will respond And Joseph will go first, I believe. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Ms Sanders. So Banyule City Council's preference is to utilise natural shade where possible, and this is guided through our Public Open Space Plan 2016 through to 2031. This plan emphasises sustainability and recognises the benefits of natural shade, such as environmental cooling and habitat creation. Additionally, on hot days, playing under a large shade sail may be unpleasant as they can trap hot air beneath them. With 55 neighbourhood playgrounds, extensive use of shade sails would not be economically or environmentally sustainable. Installing and maintaining shade sails would significantly impact on our ability to deliver high quality and varied playgrounds, as their costs would be drawn from the same budget. Instead, our open space planning and design team is actively planting more trees in playgrounds to ensure natural shade in the future. Therefore, the installation of new shade sails will only be considered for regional or busy neighbourhood playgrounds where there is insufficient natural shade.
Thank you. And our next question is Chris Parr from Watsonia. Welcome, Chris.
Evening, Mayor and Councillors, and continuing with my interest in Council and overseas affairs, my question is, can Council please outline all costings involved in its association with the ICLEI World Congress and the recent trip of a councillor to attend, and can Council please explain their decision to accept or otherwise the expenses associated with the ICLEI World Congress, and that the trip was fully self-funded by the councillor? Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Fort will respond. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for the question. As detailed in the council meeting agenda papers for the 15th of July this year, the council meeting, item 5.1 details, like any councillor can, Councillor McKern personally decided to attend the ICLEI World Congress and this international trip. And so the associated costs and expenses were solely self-funded by Councillor McKern personally, and no ratepayer funds were spent at the conference or on the conference. The only financial implications associated with Council's affiliation with ICLEI, and that's not relating to or attending and participating in the World Congress, was for the membership that Council endorsed for a trial period only for the 2023-2024 financial year, which was the annual membership fee of $3,500 in 2023 to 2024. The recommendation to consider embarking on the trial membership was a recommendation from one of Council's advisory committees, being BCAC, and was subject to a Council decision. And at the 15th of July 2025 Council meeting, Council resolved to cease that membership post-evaluation of the trial.
Thank you. Our next question was from Alicia Curry, but she's not well. And our next question is Mary O'Kane. Welcome, Mary.
Good evening, thank you. I'm going to ask a question about the Bell Street Mall, but before I do so, I'd just like to acknowledge that today, this morning, Yen Nguyen, who's 53 and with her husband have worked with, have had the bakery in the Mall for 26 years, was killed in a car accident this morning. From a vehicle that came through a red light, and so I'd just like to acknowledge that and move forward. Yeah. Okay. As an Olympia resident, I frequent the Bell Street Mall, in this particular case to get my weekly banh mi from the bakery. For several of my shopping needs, the condition of the shared spaces of the mall, its access pathways, its open spaces, its many shop fronts and walls is quite frankly disgusting. And I know that's a strong word, but I think it actually applies and has been for a long time. Many parts of the mall are dirty and unhygienic and unsightly, and in some aspects unsafe, posing both health and safety risks to visitors and traders. I think I will, so safety issues include many street lights not working, and a big stone in the centre, which I'm told children frequently hurt themselves on. There are many complex and long-standing questions regarding the upkeep of the mall. However, I would like to start with this. What methods and actions does Council take to monitor, comparatively assess and augment the maintenance and cleaning schedule for the Bell Street Mall against contractual agreements, particularly in relation but not limited to bird faeces? Thank you.
Thank you. Darren, would you like to respond on behalf of Council?
Yes, and thank you for the question, and sorry to hear about that sad news.
Mm.
As part of the funding agreement between Council and the Bell Street Mall Traders Association, funds are allocated each year to address maintenance on private property. This includes graffiti removal that is located on shops. Council graffiti contractors regularly inspect Bell Street Mall and will program graffiti removal from council assets such as bins, seats and other public utilities including light poles. The internal council cleansing team is responsible for cleaning of the mall and are on site daily. The pigeon feces was cleaned recently at significant cost and has now returned. The cleansing staff are collaborating with our building maintenance team, our economic development team, to understand the best way to address the bird droppings in the longer term. Our open space planning team are investigating further improvements for the mall, including the raised hump in the grassed area, which is popular but can be challenging for some people in our community. Council staff from multiple departments are on site at the mall every day, including Saturday and Sunday, to empty litter bins. Our ongoing efforts will include improved communication and engagement with the community to ensure the mall is treated respectfully and is available for everyone to enjoy.
Thank you. That concludes the public questions. There are no confidential items tonight, so we'll close the... Yes, Jade. Sorry, Jane, you weren't on the list. Would you like to ask your question? Oh, we won't have a response for you, sorry. Well, do you want to ask your question so we... Would you like to ask your question, Jane? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, I keep that. So the background information: at the Chelsworth Park Pavilion's draft plans workshop, Wednesday the 31st at the library, and I went to the one on Sunday morning as well, I asked for a clarification of the offset planting. I wasn't too sure what this originally meant, but I did hear about it with the North East Link. If your trees are taken out, you have offset planting somewhere else. And I was told of offset planting proposed for Wilson Reserve. So my question is, has Friends of Wilson Reserve, and particularly Robert Bender, Order of Australia, for his environmental work in this reserve, been approached and allowed input as to the proposed offset planting that is to occur in the reserve to replace the many trees that are being removed to facilitate the rebuild of the two pavilions in Chelsworth Park? And is there a plan? Do we know the actual trees and where they're going to be? Thank you.
I'm not sure if we'll have a response, but I'll ask the officers if they've got any response at this stage. Sorry, Jane.
Yeah, we'll take that on notice and get back to you, Jane. Thank you.
Very sorry, Jane. Not sure what happened there, but we'll look into it.
Jane, we'll make sure that we get your question and the answer in the minutes. Yeah.
That concludes our meeting at 10:15. Thank you for your attendance. Next ordinary meeting of council will be held on the Monday the 26th of August. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you shortly.